This is a true crime discussions channel. We speculate. This is all just speculation. Because it's true crime, it's for mature audiences only. There will be no children allowed, no exceptions. Everything on this channel falls under fair use. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. It's free. Good morning. Good morning, my lovely family members. Thank you so much for being here on this Sunday morning. I really appreciate it. We're going to talk about the trial so far with Richard Allen. If you guys want to go back over what we've talked about so far, like how we got here, why people think he's innocent, why people think he's guilty, let me know. We did that in a previous live. So today we were going to talk about like the trial and what's happened so far in the trial. I'm pulling up some Andrea Burkhart stuff because that's what y'all were telling me the other day that I needed to watch. So I figured we could watch it together. So I'm getting that pulled up. Okay, Cozy. Anders says, I doubt Richard is guilty, but it should be interesting to take part of his confessions. Cozy doesn't know much about the case. Cozy, if you want us to go over the case so far and how we've got here, let me know. We are going to start with the trial so far. Jenny, I was late this morning, so don't worry. Like I said, if you guys want to go back over how we got to the trial, let me.
We are going to tell her.
So with that, I'm going to pull up. It says day 6, but it's actually day 1 from what I understand. Okay, hold on just a minute. Let me. Just wait. So this is Andrea Burkhart.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Andrea Burkhart.
It's day 6. You're going to be able to tell just by how I look and sound as this trial goes on. The wear is going to become increasingly evident. So I do apologize for that. Hopefully I don't lose my voice over the course of this. Well, boy, what a day, guys. I have a hard time even knowing where to start. I have a hard time even knowing where to start. There's just so much to talk about.
I can pull up a
I'll give you the 10,000 foot view like I do. Today was all about the crime scene. Pretty much from beginning to end. We saw lots of photos, so many photos.
Hold on, let me go back to day 4.
Learned a lot about the collection, the examination and collection of evidence that was done at the scene. Definitely have some reactions to that. I very much have some thoughts about that. If you're on Twitter, you may have seen the exciting thing in my life.
Day 4 is opening statements. So we'll listen to opening statements first, and I'm going to see if I can pull up court TV basically reviewing the trial so far, so we can kind of get caught up, and then we'll see what this yeah, it says this person, Andrea Burkhart, who we're going to be listening to, says that she gives commentary and analysis on high-profile cases based on my nearly 2 decades of experience as a criminal defense attorney, licensed in Washington State. You guys were telling me about her, and you guys wanted to go over some of her videos, so that's what we are doing today. Oh, there was opening statements. Here we go. Now, I can't watch 3 hours of all of her videos, but we'll go over what we can. And while we're doing this, I'll see if Court TV has broke it down for us. I do have the documents. Okay, True Crime Addict says Andrea Burkhart will be live today.
Really long day today.
I do have the documents if you guys want me to pull up everything, like all the documents that have been entered in court in this case. I think I found them. If you guys want to go over that, we can. Otherwise we'll go over her, and I'll see if Court TV has like what they've said about everything so far. But what I'm trying to do is I really want to hear all the evidence. And it sounds like, she's been in the trial and has the evidence that, like, basically what I'm trying to do is let us hear what the jury's hearing and seeing.
Oh, today was a marathon, and we're only just getting started. So of course I'm going to tell you everything about it. But as I've been doing, I'm just going to go ahead and start off by giving you the 10,000 foot big takeaways from today. Here is what happened in Delphi, our first day in Carroll County in the courthouse there in the case of State versus Richard Allen. Here's our major takeaways. Judge Gold granted the state's motion in limine to exclude the composites and presumably any reference to them. That has been granted. They are out. We are not going to see the sketches. There have been no new bombshells evidence-wise in the case. And the bombshell that we had before, the hair, kind of got a little bit deflated today. We learned that the hair does belong to a female and that it is probably a relative of Libby's. So not quite the interesting side direction the case could have taken.
Okay, it bothers me that the sketches are not going to be admitted into court because that's pertinent information for the case. And I feel like the jury needs to know that there was two possible suspects. I don't think that's fair to Richard Allen, and it bothers me that we're not presenting all the evidence. I feel like all the evidence needs to be presented in order to make a well-informed, logical decision, especially when you're talking about a man's life that could possibly be innocent. Number two, the hair. If it was a relative of hers, I mean, how did it get in her hand? She didn't carry the hair with her all throughout while she was walking. Like maybe it was on her clothes or something, but it's concerning that it's in her hand when they found it. To me, that's weird. I don't understand how it would have got in her hand at the crime scene.
We did, of course, see the opening statements today. There were very good and very bad things about both sides' arguments.
Great
I
point,
shouldn't say
Crazy Chick.
arguments. They weren't arguments. They're statements. Judge Cole reminded us about that. I'll get to it. We had testimony today from the first few witnesses from the state, and
So they're linking him by the bullet they found that they say could have only come from his gun that was in the ground, from what Mob Crew said, between the two bodies. It's not enough for me. They weren't shot, they were stabbed, or somebody used a knife, not a bullet. It could have been placed there. Why did you not collect DNA? There had to be DNA all over that crime scene. I mean, when we look at the way the bodies were positioned and the sticks over them and all the things that happened that we've looked at so far, there's no way that there would have not been any DNA evidence there. And when you're dealing with something like that, when you come upon two small, beautiful children that have been done that way, you need to collect everything. And it wasn't until they went back through all of the witness statements that they pinpointed Richard Allen. There's a lot in this case I don't like.
absolutely heartbreaking testimony from Becky Patty. That's Libby's grandmother. I will tell you about that. And then the other sort of carnival related news of the
Well,
day
Trixie,
was
you'll have
that
to let
we
me know what
had
you found out.
4 members of the traditional media that were banned and had their cameras seized because they were photographing the jurors on their way into the courtroom. Very explicit no. So,
Exactly, Crazy.
yeah. Long day, guys. Let me tell you all about it. I got there at 3:30 in the morning. Very early. I thought I was doing so well. And I was the 21st person in line. 21st person in line. We weren't sure when the day started exactly how many public seats were going to be allocated. It's just me. In line, Mr. Clinton, my friend. We had a long morning together, lots of chats, several hours in line talking.
I don't want to play her whole live. You know what I mean?
Definitely helped make the afternoon a lot more tolerable.
I want to skip to the
met a lot of other wonderful people in line. I got there just about the same time Lawyer Lee did, so she was right behind me, and also
she had something to say.
So the jurors will
that
not
I'd
need
like
to
to
be
look at.
bored. There is plenty there for
Okay,
them
Trixie,
to
thank
sink
you.
their eyes into. They had a small law library in the back too, which I found a little bit. I found a little bit entertaining because it had 2 collections in the law library. It had a partial copy of the Federal Reporters, the second volume, second edition of the Federal Reporter.
I'm going to go to the most replayed parts.
Not one of the jurors. It's this whole process has been enormously confusing. But we did kind of get to see them and get our first
I don't know how to say your
view
name.
of them taking in
The Rocks?
the process, taking in the
Thank you for
arguments,
being
taking in the
here.
first bit of the
I
evidence,
appreciate you hanging out with us
gauging their
tonight.
attentiveness and so forth. So they were read the preliminary instructions.
Yeah,
Nothing really
great point.
extraordinary in there. I did make a couple of notes of things that I thought were
Okay, this is going to get back into pertinent information. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name, but I'm gonna assume it's Narox. Says kind of makes you think twice before providing information for a crime. They may come after you if they can't find the actual perpetrator. I'm with you on that. I don't think he did this, and the fact that it was 25 or 26 days before that sheriff was supposed to be reelected that they arrested him speaks volumes to me as well. I really think it was so he could say, "Hey, look what I did. While I was sheriff, I found the the perpetrator of this horrible crime. Make sure you vote for me when you go to the polling boxes. Like, I don't like it. It all stinks, in my opinion.
Were interesting in those instructions. For example, there was one instruction. It's consistent with the legal
Again, great
principles.
point,
It was just, I've
Crazy.
never heard it spelled out quite this explicitly. And so it caught my attention that if the evidence is susceptible of two reasonable interpretations, you must adopt the interpretation that favors the defendant. So that was kind of interesting. They got to give him the benefit of the doubt if they're not sure what to believe, not sure what inference to draw, or something like that.
I hope they do.
Reiterated this distinction in the language between if you find that there is insufficient evidence to convict, then you must vote not guilty. You must vote to acquit him. But if you find there is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, you may vote to convict him. So it's just a fascinating distinction. I actually had an attorney from Indiana.
In my opinion, there is so much reasonable doubt in this that I really hope he's not convicted. If I was a juror, I mean, I know the case, so I couldn't be a juror, but that's why it bothers me that they're not, excuse me, admitting the sketches, because you got anything that has to do with the case should be admitted, point blank, period, in my opinion. Because you got to give all the evidence you have, all the information, everything the public knows, everything the police know needs to be put there so that you're giving the jurors all the information to make a well-informed decision. And it bothers me when all the evidence is not admitted or given to the jurors. I'm just really irritated about that. And the sketches thing. The fact that they were looking at a completely different person. You gotta tell the jury that. I don't, and there's just so much, like the judge saying that the attorneys that wanted to represent him for free could not do it. It all is fishy AF. And I don't think, because of all of those things, there's always going to be a side that feels that injustice was done, because no matter which way they go, if they go with innocent, then all the guilty people are going to feel like that it was a setup. And then all the people who feel that he's innocent, if they go with guilty, they're not going to agree with the verdict, because there's just so much in this case that you're doing that's just not appropriate. Allegedly speculating, in my opinion.
Indiana reach out to me and explain that this derives from a provision of the Indiana Constitution that does kind of seem to reserve the right of the jury to decide what the law is. And so normally the distinction is the jury decides the facts of the case, the judge decides the law of the case, and there's a hard line between them. So the jury's job is just to take the law as the judge gives it to them and apply it to the facts as they find them from the evidence. So that's kind of what prevents, the jury from engaging in nullification if they follow that rule. Indiana apparently provides some kind of leeway for the jury to decide maybe we don't agree with what the judge says the law is, that they also have the right to decide the law. So very interesting distinction. It's one I'm if I get some time this weekend, I'm gonna have time on a plane. I got a million things on my list I'm thinking about doing, but that's one of them. I would love to dig into that a little bit and see if I can get a little deeper understanding of that distinction and that nuance, because it really fascinates me. It's so different from just the rule that we have in Washington. Washington's very clear. If you find him beyond a reasonable doubt, you must convict. Like, they no leeway. No leeway. It's your duty to accept the law as the court gives it to you. A lot of instructions along these lines. They should attempt to fit the evidence to the presumption that the defendant is innocent and the presumption that the witnesses are truthful. So
That's an interesting statement, and I'm glad that they did state that in the opening statements. Good morning, Detention Hall. Good to see you. Anders says the defense bullet expert was not allowed to testify either. I did not know that. That's really interesting. I don't understand why they wouldn't have a bullet expert testify. Like, obviously somebody tried, but like, again, the fact that you're not letting that bullet expert testify on the bullet, the only thing that you have that ties Richard Allen to the scene of the crime, again, it speaks volumes that you're trying to fudge the case up. Tensional says, but my 61 confessions. Yeah, I agree, but they're saying that he was in a state of psychosis and he confessed to taking out his entire family and red rumming his grandchildren that he's never had. Like, there's so many confessions, but it, again, that's weird to me, because I have to question, is he trying to make himself look insane so he can go with an insanity plea? Which would mean he really did it. So again, there's things on both sides that are just sketch.
That I also thought was kind of interesting. Attempt to fit it. So if there's different ways to interpret it, got to give the witnesses the benefit of the doubt, but got to also presume that it's consistent with the defendant being innocent. They have to have a reason for disregarding the evidence. If they're not going to consider something or include it in their decision making, they can't just do that arbitrarily. I don't like that piece of evidence. There needs to be a reason why they think it's not credible or not entitled to weight or something like that. Not going to get transcripts of witness testimony during deliberations. This varies state by state, but some places you can get a read back or something like that. We saw this in Karen Reed as well. No ability to go back and review the witness testimony. So they are very dependent on their notes. They were provided with pads and pens for them to be able to do that. The jurors are allowed to ask questions. They've already done that today. So I'll talk about that when we get to it. Gave a little bit of instruction about the process. So after they go through the attorney questioning, the judge asks the jurors if they have any questions. The jurors are to raise their hands and write down their question if they have one. They give it to the bailiff. Bailiff gives it to the judge. Judge discusses it with the attorney to confer on whether the law allows that question to be asked. And if it is, they will ask it. If not, they will not. So I did appreciate that she explained that process to them so that it's clear. It's the question is whether the law allows it, not is some party arguing against it or not. Like it's not going to fall on one side or the other. The jurors have no obligation to discuss the reasons for the verdict after the case. They're not precluded from it, but they don't have any obligation to. And then this other little interesting twist that is very, again, just very different from Washington. From I think I've never seen a rule like this in another jurisdiction, where they're not allowed to discuss the case, but they can discuss the evidence before they go into deliberations, like during recesses and stuff like that. As long as
So yeah, another confession he made was that, like Crazy Chick said, he said he shot them, but we all now know that's not how they passed. Right. He's confessed to all these things that did not happen. Now, they said, I know from listening to some of the trial, they said that some of the things he confessed to, only the Red Rummer would have known. But again, I question that, because the way that you have made him look guilty, are you just saying that to make him look guilty? Is it not something that he could have heard? Is it something that maybe you asked him in interrogation, like you were trying to lead him to admit to something, and you asked him about something and he later remembered it and confessed to it? I don't I wouldn't take any confession into I would not consider any confession if I knew, and if the jury knows how many times he confessed to false things that didn't happen. I would throw all of that out if I was a juror. Good morning,
as
Joy.
everybody is present and as
Thank
long
you
as
for
they
being
don't
here.
form an opinion. So I guess they can say things like, I mean, I don't know. I guess if you're being really strict, you can't even say, wow, that was weird, because, that was weird was an opinion. I don't think that's probably quite as strict as they mean. They just mean don't decide guilt, don't decide critical issues until all of the evidence is in. Uh, but just this very different exception to the rule I'm used to, that you say nothing. You may not talk to the other jurors about what's going on in court until you are in that jury room for the deliberations. And it's just to keep that process confined and keep it clean.
Detention says Anders, they've conveniently lost all evidence of those supposed details he gave. They also conveniently lost all evidence of people being questioned about the crime right after it happened. I mean, it's all just sketch and fishy and BS, in my opinion.
So little different in Indiana. They will let them chat about the evidence all together as long as they don't form an opinion. Mr. McLeland gave the opening statement for the state. He gave a very good opening. Got to say, he gave a very good opening. That said, it started off very
Great point,
inauspiciously.
Crazy.
They have a extremely large TV screen there in the courtroom to display the video exhibits, digital evidence, and so forth. So Mr. McLeland had wanted to play a video, not exactly sure which one, maybe the bridge guy video, not totally sure. He wanted to play it for his opening, but they couldn't get it to work. So after they fiddled around with it for approximately 5 minutes, they gave up and he just went ahead and proceeded to his opening. It was largely a recap of what he.
Okay, that's sketch. Like you all of a sudden when the defense wants to play a video for the opening statement, the TV doesn't work. Like what else is going to happen?
He gave in his mini statement, even down to his theme, right? He says, "A few days ago, I told you this case was about bridge guy, a bullet, and the brutal murder of two young girls." So repeated that theme. Didn't have a new one to replace it. I was wondering that in the morning when we were waiting outside, like he kind of burned that statement. Is he gonna have a new one, or is he gonna just try it again? Well, he found a way to recycle it by just saying, "A few days ago, I told you that." So it just served as a reminder, but he got to repeat it. And now he was going to give us the rest of the story. So there wasn't a ton of detail that he added, but I'm going to just go ahead and cover the basic facts that he outlined in the opening statement. He anticipates the evidence is going to show. So February 13th was an unseasonably warm day. They had the day off school, and so Abby and Libby decided to go to the Monon High Bridge. These trails are part of a bigger system in Delphi, go through town, go out through the periphery of town. And the Monon High Bridge is an abandoned train trestle about 60 feet above Deer Creek.
Wow, the
They had asked
tension.
Kelsey
I
German,
didn't even
Libby's
know
sister,
that.
to go with them, but she couldn't because she had work. So instead, she drove them. And while she drove them, Libby was sitting in the front seat. Abby was sitting in the back seat. Libby was snapping some pictures. She took a selfie that ultimately ended up in evidence. We were able to see that. Uh, Libby and Abby were dropped off at what they're calling the Mears entrance to the trail system. The trail system has all kinds of different entrances. And so when I went out to the trail system and walked out to the bridge, the Mears entrance is basically between it would come in and meet the trail between where I started and the Monon High Bridge. So
Joy says it sounds like another case of police corruption. And that's really what it all boils down to: police corruption, people trying to get reelected. And the problem is a man's life is on the line. And you're going to convict a man of something he didn't do just because he came to the police station and tried to be a good citizen and let you know he was there that day, in my opinion.
a little bit like not quite halfway down that trail. Abby and Libby were best friends. They were more like sisters than friends. Abby didn't have a phone, only Libby had a phone, but she had set Abby's fingerprint to be able to use Libby's phone. So that's how close they were. They were both at Delphi Middle School. On the day they went down to the trail, Libby was on the phone. She was posting to Snapchat, texting, looking at photos. The Monon High Bridge is a very high, very old, very long bridge. Once you're on it, there is nowhere to go. It is high, there's no rails, it's long. You would have to jump off or something, and that's not going to be good for your health. The ties are also very old. There are some loose and some missing. So it is very scary to cross and downright dangerous, but kids like to do that kind of thing. Libby was using her phone while they crossed. She took a photo of Abby that she posted to Snapchat. Libby was crossing the bridge first, and then Abby was coming behind. So as they got across, they looked back, and as Libby got across, she looked back and she saw that a man was following Abby, and she had a bad feeling about it, according to Mr. McLeland. So she decided she needed to film what was happening, and this took place at 2:13 p.m. The man followed them off the bridge, pulled a gun, and ordered them down the hill. They comply, and at that point, the video cuts off. It's a little bit of a description of what's there on the video. Derek German, Libby's father, was supposed to pick them up, and he arrived at the trail to pick them, but they were nowhere to be found. So eventually, police were called. There was a search that went until about 2 in the morning before it was paused, resumed again at about 6 a.m. Both were found later dead just upstream from the Monon High Bridge.
Good morning, Wonder Woman. Thank you for being here with us this morning. Wonder Woman says it's very suspicious and convenient that they didn't record the key interviews or lost the recordings. So we just need to trust what they claim he said. Exactly. Exactly. And, just trying to put all the evidence out there and play both sides, to be fair. they could say that, well, the bullet was there. We know Bridge Guy pulled a gun because it's stated in the video. So did he pull the gun? Did he try to shoot the gun? The pew pew. I'm already messing up. Did he try to shoot the pew pew, and then the bullet, it didn't work, it misfired, and is that why the bullet's there? Because he's the bridge guy that pulled the pew pew. That could be something to take into consideration. I guess that's what they're kind of going with, the fact that bridge guy pulled a pew pew, and then maybe he tried to use the pew pew and it didn't work and the bullet was left there. But I don't know. There's just so much other evidence that points to it not being him. And I question if that bullet was planted.
It was a gruesome scene. Libby was completely naked, covered in blood. Her throat was cut in several places. Her blood was on the ground, and it was on a tree that was nearby. Abby was wearing her own underwear, but wearing Libby's shirt and jeans. She was wearing shoes, but no socks. And the rest of the girls' clothes were found in Deer Creek.
That's right. Great point that I just forgot about. Gold prevented the defense bullet expert from testifying. Again, so if you're going on, I had just said this earlier and done forgot. But if you're going on the fact that the bullet was there, then you would want the defense, the bullet expert to testify. If that's what you're going to, because that's the only thing you got that ties him to the crime scene. So that is definitely pertinent to the investigation and to getting all the facts out there, because you got the expert on the only thing that ties him to the crime scene and you're not letting them testify.
Sole exception was one shoe, which together with Libby's phone was found underneath Abby. And then they found, of course, an unspent 40 caliber Winchester bullet between the two girls. So the phone was taken for processing. They recovered the photos and the video of the bridge guy. So witnesses then began to come forward. There were 3 girls that were on the trail that day that had taken a picture on the bench east of Freedom Bridge, which is a bridge that's on the trail. I went across Freedom Bridge to get to Monon High Bridge from
Another
the
great
Mears
point.
Trail. You would not need
Wonder
to go
Woman.
across Freedom Bridge. It's already past that point. So they reported running into a man on a trail who was walking with purpose, and he was not friendly. And Mr. McLeland says that was Bridge Guy. Another witness, Betsy Blair, she had walked up to the Monon High Bridge, saw a man out on the platform. This is also Bridge Guy. And then finally, Sarah Carbaugh reported seeing a man walking on the side of the road, muddy and bloody, like he had just slaughtered a pig. And according to Mr. McLeland, this is also Bridge Guy. Years passed, and at some point, somebody was reviewing an old report by a DNR, Department of Natural Resources officer, who
I'm not
spoke with
sure
Richard
either.
Allen in 2017. He told the officer he'd arrived at the trails at 1:30 and left at 3:30, and that he ran into 3 girls. The sheriff Liggett thought that if they could find the man who had run into the 3 girls, that would give them Bridge Guy. That's who it was, the man who was walking with purpose and was not friendly. So this led them to call Mr. Allen and interview him again. In this interview, he said he was wearing a blue or a black Carhartt jacket and jeans. They searched his home, where they found a gun with a 40 caliber gun, and found the clothes, and they found several knives as well. They tested the bullet, and according to their testing, of course, it came from Richard Allen's gun.
I think it was the Sig Sauer that they found that matched the bullet. I think it was the Sig Sauer that they found that matched the bullet.
So they interviewed him again, and Mr. Allen had no explanation for how his bullet
Right?
got there on the
Wonder.
scene. He was arrested, and then while incarcerated, he told investigators what they already knew, that he had killed Abby and Libby. He gave details of the how and the why. This was not
Yep.
the
Tricked
product of
me.
interrogation. These were volunteered, spontaneous statements that he made. The admissions had details that only the killer would know, according to Mr. McLeland.
That's the part that gets me. But like you guys are saying, you're not sharing the interviews with us or what he said or the confessions because you don't have them. And there's already been claims of the Odinism in the prison, and that the prison guards were making him confess on the phone to his wife, and that's why he confessed in the first place. And now all of a sudden there's none of this stuff is recorded. Like, come on, stop it. No, sir. Crazy says also, if these girls were unalive with knives, why would he handed himself into the police station to say that he was there on the day? Wouldn't he have been covered in scratches and cuts? Another great point. There would have been some kind, whoever did it is going to have some kind of defensive marks, because the girls aren't just going to cooperate. They're going to try to fight back.
So he closed by saying that the killer had hidden in plain sight for 5 years, and that you will be firmly convinced that Richard Allen is the man on the bridge who killed Abby and Libby. He was going to have his way with them, but he was interrupted, forced them across the stream, and killed them. So that's the broad outline of the state's theory of the case. We then got Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin told us that Richard Allen is completely innocent. That's how he started. That was a theme that he hit on throughout his opening.
Good morning, Christopher Reed. Christopher says all phone calls in prison are recorded. They are recorded. And they do, well, then that would mean, I know that he confessed to his wife over the phone, and I would assume they have that because the phone calls are recorded. I think the other confessions were written, and for whatever reason, they have none of his confessions, from what I understand from what's happened in court so far. So again, like, if we're supposed to believe he did all of this confessing and you have no proof of it, we're just supposed to take the prison guard's words for it, or the police word. We're supposed to just trust them on that. And it was stated before this trial that the prison guard was standing basically while he was there on the phone, and coerced him, or kind of made him and confess to his wife over the phone, because supposedly he confessed to his wife like 6 times on the phone that he did it. And then he's been given medication for psychosis, all of the other confessing that he's killed his grandchildren and he doesn't even have any, and his whole family and his family are still alive. All of these things are weird. Thank you for being here, Christopher Reed.
He said there will be reasonable doubt from the evidence and from the lack of the evidence. He asked the jury to wait. That assured them that the defense wanted the truth to come out in the courtroom for both the jury and for the families as well. So the truth, according to Mr. Baldwin, is that the investigation was messed up from the very beginning and up to as recently as the last few days. So back in the beginning,
Agreed.
evidence was lost. Key witness interviews were gone forever, and they didn't even write down the names of the people that had been interviewed. So there was no way to recreate some of these early investigative steps that police had taken. About a month later, they lost.
How do you not write down the names of the people you're interviewing? You have to sign a paper when you talk to the police that has your name on it, and you have to sign it. Like, what?
More, a period from about April 29th to June 2nd. They lost more interviews. During the middle of their investigation, they got into a turf war with the FBI and kicked them out. The problem is that the FBI had been assisting with the digital extraction from Libby's phone. And so the police kicked them out, kicked the FBI out before discussing the FBI's findings from that extraction.
Why are they kicking the FBI out? You would want the FBI to help. Why are you kicking them out? How do you have the authority to kick the FBI out of your investigation?
Then 2 days ago, Mr. Baldwin tells us that law enforcement is scrambling because there's a hair in Abby's hand. This was the hair that we heard about for the very first time in this mini opening statement. He gave us a little bit more detail that it was wrapped around her fingers and it had a root. So DNA was extracted from it. The analyst testified that the hair might be from a relative of Libby's. It's not Libby's hair and it's not Abby's hair, but it is female. So they need still to complete the testing when we're in trial 7 days later. It's a little bit incomprehensible. 7 days, 7 years later, that they still need to test mom, grandma, sister, or somebody like that to be able to tell us if it's
Great
a
point.
family of Libby or somebody else. So in 7 years, they never turned in the grandmother, Becky, Patty, or Kelsey German's DNA to try to match it. They had the DNA, didn't turn it in. So we don't have.
Because, again, and why? Why not? Is it because Like, okay, thinking about why would a female be at the scene of the crime? Well, if it was some kind of Odinism cult type of thing and they were really doing some kind of sacrifice, then there would be men and women there. So that would put a woman, that would explain why a woman's hair was at the scene of the crime if that theory was correct. Now, knowing that you have this DNA evidence, why are you not going down that avenue and testing it? That does not make any sense. Is it because you know what female it belongs to already and you don't want them to know what female that is? Is it a corrections officer? I mean, again, allegedly speculating. That's how are you not going to test? And again, going back to Quentin Simon, they didn't test the vomit. There's other thing. I mean, in all these cases, they're not running DNA tests. Why are you not running DNA tests and testing evidence at the scene of the crime for everything that you could possibly find out what's going on?
Have the result back yet, and we are hoping to get that result back. Now, part of the defense theme is that the truth can come out on a phone. He had a phone that he would continue to show the jury. He says the forensic data on phones doesn't lie or cheat. And so when you find out what is on Libby's phone, the state's case is going to start to fall apart. So he's said there were a couple of guys from the Idaho State Police that were in charge of analyzing the phone dumps and the data, but they were ill equipped to understand it.
Right,
That's
Wonder
important
Woman.
because this phone data is accurate and reliable and is going to be incredibly important. He asked the jury to hold the state to their theory of the case because he contends they are going to have to change it as the evidence comes out. It's not going to be able to be reconciled with the state's theory. So, according to the state's theory, he recaps it for us. According to the state's theory, Abby and Libby were dead by 4:00 p.m. at the latest on Monday, February the 13th. Uh, there's They don't move. The phone doesn't move. They are killed and abandoned and left in place. And that the phone was left under Abby's body the whole time from 3:30, 4:00 p.m. until the time that the bodies were discovered about noon the following day. So Richard Allen.
So I thought they had already searched the area where their bodies were that night and nothing was there. And then they came back the next day and they found them and in an area that had previously been searched. Or am I wrong about that?
Allen arrived at the trails on the 13th. He parked at the CPS lot. We've kind of seen on a map now where that is. It brings them a little bit. You follow the road to get to the Mears trailhead and then follow the Mears trailhead out to the bridge. So it's a little bit further down. The trail itself runs parallel to this main road, this big county road
Great
300
points,
north that
detention.
goes in the area. So he drove in an abnormal way, parked past Mears at CPS at 1:30. This again is the state's theory that he went away, took a route that there's no real obvious or good reason why he would take that route. Parked at the CPS building at 1:30, and according to the state, the car is parked there until sometime after 4:00 when he left.
Wonder Woman says, this is very strange. I wonder if someone involved in the case, like cops or a detective, is trying to destroy evidence or redirect. It's too much negligence going on. And that's a perfect point. And I mean, again, going back to what Detention Hall said before that, more than likely the bullet came from any one of the dozens of law enforcement officers trespassing all over, or, walking all over the crime scene. At least two of the law enforcement agencies on site carried 40 Smith & Wesson. And I mean, all perfect points. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. Um, it's just too much negligence to be actual negligence, in my opinion.
And then once he left, he didn't come back to the crime scene. He didn't take Libby's phone. So the defense theory is that Richard Allen was never on the trail at the same time as Libby and Abby. The witnesses describe a bridge guy, as being 5'11". Does not fit Richard Allen's description whatsoever.
Good morning, Bear and Marshmallow. Jenny says an acquaintance here in Nevada is a defense attorney and said if the state feels one person is guilty, they won't test that sample. That's a great point. Thank you so much for being here, Bear and Marshmallow. I really appreciate it. She says that Andrea is covered this case beautifully. Also, Lauren at Hidden True Crime. I honestly worry this man is going to prison for a crime he didn't commit. I think most of the world is there with you on that. Um, Jenny also said, not sure if it goes for all cases, but this case, a GSW from two people, if they feel one person is at fault, they will test the other. Okay.
Apparently doesn't fit his description in other respects as well.
Yeah,
According to the
Richard Allen
defense,
Short.
Mr. Allen was gone from the trails by about 1:30. That he got there about noon or 12:30 or so. And that his car is gone by 2:15 p.m. And so if his car is gone, then Richard Allen is gone. So Betsy Blair is important because when she drove by the CPS lot at about 2:15 that afternoon, there's a camera, a surveillance camera in a private facility, is a place called Hoosier Harvest Store. We heard a description. It's kind of a grain storage silo and cattle silage, like when they cut down like the old straw and stuff like that, I'll feed that to cattle. So warehouses to store that. This is Hoosier Harvest Store. They have a camera that has captured vehicles that go by on that section of the road. So she will describe the vehicle that she saw at the CPS lot at 2:15. One vehicle. She said, "My dad had a Mercury Comet in the 1960s. It's an old-timey car, very angular, has crisp lines, and that it looked just like her dad's old car." Richard Allen drove a 2014 Ford Focus that looks absolutely nothing like an old Mercury Comet. So Richard Allen was gone by then, is the defense theory. And the state doesn't know how to account for that. So what happened to the
If her dad drove that type of car, then I would go with her testimony as seeing that car is accurate, because if her dad drove that type of car and that's the car she grew up riding in, then she probably knows very well what it looks like, or the type of car. She said look like that, so it could be a number of cars, but regardless, an older style car, an antique car. And if he was gone by 2:15 at the latest, there's no way he had time to do this. And like she said, the state is not able to account for this information. And that's a witness statement.
girls? Mr. Baldwin described that Becky Patty, the grandmother, lives with her son, Derek German. They described what they did earlier that day. They had breakfast, they talked. Kelsey, Abby's older sister, Libby's older sister, drove Abby and Libby to the trail. And the camera shows Kelsey dropping them off. It shows her like right around the time that she had dropped them off. And so that was at 1:49 p.m. The girls came onto the trail right after Betsy. So they basically followed Betsy Blair down the trail to the bridge. And it was about 2:05 when they got on the bridge. They passed Betsy Blair as she was coming back from the bridge. So he agrees the bridge is long, high, dangerous. It's got holes and gaps in it. Like, this thing just sounds absolutely terrifying to cross, honestly. And close to halfway across, Libby was ahead, turned around, took the photo of Abby at 2:07. At
That
2:13
was
is
a
the abduction
horrible
at the end of
case,
the bridge. It's caught
intentional.
on video. According to Mr. Baldwin, it's not very panoramic. You won't see much. Like, you don't see the water. You don't see the end of the bridge or something like that. You hear the voice saying "girls down the hill," but the man on the video's mouth doesn't move. And so the defense is going to contend maybe more than one person. So at the end of the bridge, when they get to the end, you have the choice to go right or left. So they went left, which takes them down a steep incline. And
If if his mouth didn't move and there was somebody else that said girls down the hill, then why is it out of the realm of possibility to think there was also a girl there, a female?
we don't actually know. He says we won't actually be able to show which way they
Good
went
morning,
down.
Shirley.
But
Thank you
either
for
way,
being
at the
here.
bottom there is an access road, and it goes under the bridge, under the Monon High Bridge, all the way up to the home of a man named Brad Weber. So, possibility that there was a vehicle or other people or something like that were making use of this access driveway. And Mr. Baldwin says the evidence suggests the girl may have gotten to a vehicle down there. So I don't know what evidence that's going to be. May just be inference, but but potentially a vehicle was there in that driveway. He says there's really not strong evidence about what happened. The data from Libby's phone showed that she was connecting to the tower and receiving texts and messages and so forth until 5:44 p.m., at which point the phone no longer connected. Then at 4:33 a.m., it suddenly reconnected. So the defense theory is this is when the phone came back into the area after about 10 or 12 hours of being out of signal range, basically. So this was the phone was supposed to be under Abby's body the entire time under the state's theory. It seems to think they won't be able to account for that, the issue with the connection. So
So basically, what she's saying is that there's an access road down there, and they're saying the defense is saying that they possibly got into a car on the access road, were driven somewhere, and the phone went out of range for about, which I think she said about 12 hours. And then at 4:30 in the morning, the phone all of a sudden comes back into range where it's picked up by the towers that are close by the Monon High Bridge. And that would account for why I remember hearing that the bodies were not there and that area had previously been searched that night and they weren't found until 12 o'clock the next day. And if they're stating this as a defense, they've got to have some evidence for it. So that's really interesting. That puts them leaving the whole entire park and not coming back until around 4:30 in the morning. And if the phone was under her, how did it lose signal and then all of a sudden pick signal back up at 4:30 in the morning? If we know the phone was under the bodies or the body, that means that it was placed on the ground or fell out on the ground before the child was placed on top of it on the ground and laid out in the way we saw that appeared to be like a sacrifice.
after 4 p.m., when Richard Allen left and never came back, according to Mr. Baldwin, the data will show that human hands handled the phone. Don't know what that means. Maybe somebody tried to fingerprint access something. Don't know, but the phone registered human hands handling it. And at that point,
Bear and Marshmallow, down at I think it's down at the chat box, you should see a little, like, it looks like a little dollar bill, I think, and then you can, like, become a member. I'm not sure. They can tell you in chat how to do it. I'm not real sure. Thank you for considering becoming a member, though. We do have memberships. It's called Speculation Station. You can also just become a member of our family over here just by clicking the subscribe button. And if you don't mind, please give us a thumbs up so more people get to see us in the algorithm.
point in time, Richard Allen was at home and he had never came back. So they contacted AT&T to ping the phone. And again, the last ping was at 5:44 p.m. before the phone disconnected. They continued to try to ping it every 15 minutes. Around 10 o'clock, Mullen, the investigator, contacted a gentleman from the ISP named Mitch Walker, who is the ping guy. And his explanation for what was happening with the phone was that it was either not working any longer or it's out of the area. So when they recovered the phone, it was in working order. That means what is left is that the phone was out of the area, and that's the explanation for the lack of pings. It was 4:33 a.m. when it reconnected. Nobody's going to know exactly where it was when it reconnected, but it came back into the area. So the defense theory is that somebody brought the girls back down to where they were found into range. And at that time, 15 texts populated onto the phone once it reconnected, texts that hadn't been able to go through while it was out of range. And so sometime after somebody killed the girls and they put the phone under Abby's body. The defense alleges that the girls were not where they were found on the 14th, the day before, and they're relying on the search party to establish that. So the search party was assembled very quickly because it was not like Libby to be late and to not let people know where she was. So the family acted quickly. Word went out on Facebook. The search party grew. They had different areas. They have a gentleman named Fire Chief Sterrett, I believe is the name, where his part of the search was near the area where the bodies should have been.
Everyone who hates ads will be using this Chrome extension by 2025. I feel like I just
and but across the creek, not
Sorry,
actually in that
Basil was
spot,
sitting in my
across the
lap.
creek. So just across from the bridge, about 300 yards from the bridge at a little bit of an angle. And so they were doing a grid search. People were supposed to spread out on the sides. Chief Sterrett will apparently testify that he saw flashlights from people searching on the other side of the creek from him, where the bodies were found, and also where they were found was a flat area. It was a natural place for people to walk if they were out there searching, like in the dark and just kind of taking the path of least resistance. You'd probably take the flat spot. So Sterrett
Detention says the FBI is a supporting agency in most cases. They can't simply take over a case. Okay, thank you for that. I would think they would still welcome their help, though, and not tell them to basically leave.
doesn't know for sure where they were. They're not going to, try to oversell that, but just a lot of flashlights over in that general area. The state found the clothing in the creek. The searchers were preparing for the worst, the possibility that the girls had fallen, drowned, or something like that were going to be found in the creek. And so many people were
Oh,
looking along the creek. They should have seen the clothing. It should have been there, but nobody saw it. One of the Detective Holman will say that from where the girls were found to the bridge, you would be able to hear voices on the bridge. And there would have been 4 people walking on the bridge during the time of this abduction and murder, very close to the bodies, and they heard nothing. They heard no screams, they heard no talking, they heard not even any rustling like of footsteps. I will say
so that makes me believe again the defense's theory that they were put into a vehicle and brought back to the scene of the crime at 4:30 in the morning. Because if people walking by on the bridge would have heard them screaming, hollering, or even footsteps, how did it happen and nobody heard a damn thing? That again doesn't make sense.
say it is extremely rustly out there when I went for my walk. Not just
Oh
your
yeah,
own feet
Bear.
on the
I'm
ground,
sorry.
but
I hope you
there's all
figure it
kinds of
out.
little
Thank you for
squirrels
trying.
and deer. And I mean, I saw like 3 deer just in this little half-mile area. All kinds of wildlife out there making snapping branches and making rustling noises. So it's very difficult to move around quietly out there. The witnesses did not.
I didn't mean to pause it right there, but Crazy Chick says that the phone was probably on flight mode, like on airplane mode. Yeah, it could have been. Um Bear and Marshmallow says a lot of small town police departments get territorial and don't want FBI involved, like they think it makes them look inadequate or something. That's how my dad explained it, who is a retired officer. Okay, that's really cool. Or that's really interesting. I didn't that makes sense. Eek, thank you so much for the $5 Stoopers $50. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Anders. You're awesome. Thank you.
Not hear anything, according to
Wow,
Mr.
Anders,
Baldwin.
thank you so much.
So he turned to address the bullets and the confessions. He says, first, none of it matters with the phone data showing otherwise. It doesn't matter. If we rely on the hard data, then this other stuff is insignificant. First, to the confessions, we're going to see videos of Richard Allen in his cell where he was watched 24 hours a day, the conditions that he was in, described the size and the setting of the cell, and that Mr. Allen went into prison fragile to begin with.
No, Anders, it doesn't say kroner for me. I know it says SEK, so I'm assuming that's your dollar, dollar denomination. I don't know how to say it, but it does say that. So I understand what you're saying. But thank you so much for that. I can't believe you did that. Thank you so much.
And that these videos are going to be upsetting. Within 2 weeks of being brought into prison, he was telling an uncle, don't give me money, don't hire a lawyer. Maybe I'll just admit to all of it so you don't have to suffer. And then it was about 6 months later that the confessions, he started to make these confessions where he said he shot the girls, except they weren't shot.
Thank you,
And of
E.
course, we've heard that the defense experts will say that all of the ingredients were there for these to be false confessions. The magic bullet, he's describing it. This is the defense term for it. The magic bullet was found in the ground. There was no photo of or video or anything of the bullet being recovered, being retrieved out of the ground. There's just apparently a single photograph of it being in place, and then nothing else until the bullet is in the lab.
Thank you,
So,
guys. I
don't
appreciate
see
that.
the process of it being removed from the ground. A very interesting piece of information: the law enforcement in this area commonly used 40 caliber ammunition, and that they commonly have Sig Sauer brand firearms. They're very
That's what Detention Hall was saying earlier, that the type of bullet found, the magic bullet, as the defense is calling it, again, was found in the ground. Nobody photographed it, and that's the same kind of weapon that law enforcement uses. That's interesting.
very common. So it's possible that police dropped a bullet, but nobody asked. It's possible to test the police officers' guns, but that didn't happen either. Brad Weber, the homeowner who lived on the far side of the creek at the end of the driveway, also had a 40 caliber Sig Sauer in his vehicle. They tested that gun, and it was not excluded as being the source of the bullet. Now, this really just gets back to this whole issue with the ballistics that I've been going on and on about, since this case really captured my attention. Because if we are going to say the science is so good that we can identify this bullet as coming exclusively from Mr. Allen's gun, that means by necessity we can exclude the rest of the universe of firearms. They could not have produced it. Only Mr. Allen's gun can have produced it. But lo and behold, upon testing, we can't exclude this other 40 caliber Sig Sauer that happens to be in the neighborhood.
That's interesting. That's really interesting and pertinent to the case. Crazy says these girls were meant to be meeting someone there, so what stops them from meeting said people and getting into a car with them? Right. I mean, I don't see it as, I don't think that it's not possible. I think it's very possible that they did meet someone, and it would explain why nobody heard anything from the bridge. Detention says, if the chain of custody of that bullet is compromised, as it likely is, then it's a nothing burger, right? And if you don't have the bullet tying him to the scene of the crime, then what do you have that says he's guilty? Nothing. I really hope the jury does reasonable doubt, takes it into consideration, and he's not convicted of this, because I really don't think that they have enough to convict him. Good morning, Norma. Thank you so much for being here. You're fine. Anytime you come is right on time, love. Thank you so much for being here and spending your Sunday morning with us.
Does tend to undermine the testing a little bit in my eyes. The test itself, he indicated they'll call Dr. Warren to be critical of the testing process. So he described a little bit of the process. The bullet had markings on it, but it had not
Yes,
been shot from the firearm. It had
Anders.
merely been cycled through, but it had sufficient markings on it to be able to do an analysis.
Under the fake account of a guy named Anthony Schatz that had no idea that Keegan Klein was using his photo.
Problem sometimes with something like an unspent bullet is it might have a mark on it, like from the magazine or from loading, but it's just not enough to be able to distinguish it from other guns, from other markings. You typically need a combination of things: the firing pin, the markings from the ejectment. I mean, just stuff like that will help them have more points of comparison. So it had sufficient markings on this bullet to be able to make a comparison. So the testing, what they did for this process, they took a pristine bullet and they cycled it through Richard Allen's gun, just like they would. Their theory is that this bullet would have been cycled through his gun. And the problem is that pristine bullet produced markings that were not sufficient for a comparison. So it didn't create a like type of exemplar. So they then fired the bullet to try to get more markings on it and see what happened. Once they fired the bullet, then they're able to compare the markings on the shell casing to the bullet that was in the ground. And so based on that, that's why they're saying they can match it to Richard Allen's firearm. The problem is these are not apples and apples. These are apples and oranges that are being compared, because the bullet on the ground had never been fired. So the cycling was not enough to produce the markings that were present on the bullet found in the ground. Mr. Baldwin also says that our own eye.
So they basically are saying, because they fired a bullet from Richard Allen's gun, they were able to compare it to a bullet on the ground that had not been fired through the gun and know that it's Richard Allen's, which again does not make any sense. If the bullet had not been fired through the gun, then the markings they're talking about wouldn't be on the bullet. So how do you know that I guess because it was put in the gun and it misfired, but it still doesn't make any sense. Like she said, you're comparing apples to oranges.
eyeballs will be
Right.
able to look at the photographs of these two bullets and tell us that they don't match. He described very quickly subclasses, the idea that any manufacturer is going to produce guns that will make similar markings because they're similar makes. They have similar mechanisms. They're probably made on the same machines and stuff like that, like we talked about yesterday. So in many ways, lots of markings will be consistent between guns. So he argues that the magic bullet is of no value. He brings up Melissa Oberg, the analyst who is no longer.
And again, if you don't have the bullet connecting Richard Allen to the scene of the crime, all you have is him saying he was there that day, then what do you even have to build a case?
Longer with ISP, but will testify that she has done over 1,100 or 1,300 comparisons, and she has never been wrong. But the other people that she has supervised, they have. She's peer reviewed their work. They've made mistakes, but she never did. So, according to the defense, they, the state, have a magic bullet, but we have other evidence. We have the hard evidence, and he's showing the jury the phone at that time. He argues the timeline is not on their side. So, according to Mr. Baldwin, Betsy Blair arrives around 1:49 p.m., which is right before Kelsey drops the girls off. When she got to the bridge, the guy that they're claiming is bridge guy is 50 feet away. And that guy is described as early 20s, maybe 30, with brown,
Right.
fluffy
True
hair.
crime. Exactly.
So Richard Allen has worn his hair short since 1989. He was in the military, and that is his preference for how to wear it. Also, the most really notable thing about Mr.
Yep.
Allen is
There.
he's so small. He is very short. Betsy said nothing about him being short, and
Great
so
point.
likewise, the car doesn't match the description. They are setting up the stage that this is the killer. This person that Betsy Blair saw, who doesn't match Mr. Allen, and the car doesn't match Mr. Allen. He described Betsy Blair and Sarah Carbaugh as bookends. Betsy Blair saw Bridgeman at the beginning of this incident where the murders would have taken place. Sarah Carbaugh saw him at the end, and it's supposed to be the same guy. The defense is alleging that Sarah Carbaugh's story is inconsistent, that when she first spoke to police in 2017, she said the guy that she saw had on a tan jacket and was muddy. And that was the extent of her description. In 2019, after the bridge guy videos had been released and people had seen that, the photo, the still photo in the video, at this point, she has now changed it to saying the man she saw had a blue jacket and he was bloody like he slaughtered a pig. So pretty big inconsistencies if that is the case.
And taking that into consideration, her first witness statement was that the guy was wearing a tan jacket and he was muddy. And then the second one after she saw the bridge guy was that he was wearing a blue jacket and he was muddy and bloody like he had just slaughtered a pig. Again, I mean, the second statement would be inaccurate and incredible, like not credible. Because you would have to go on what they said and pretty much immediately after what happened. You'd have to go in the first witness statement, and the first witness statement describes somebody muddy with a tan jacket, not at all what Richard Allen was wearing. You like after that statement, then there's been outside evidence to come in and fudge up her recollection of the person.
So, according to the defense, if the man that Betsy saw was not Richard Allen, it blows apart their theory. And likewise, if Sarah Carbaugh, if the man she saw is not Richard Allen, or if they didn't see the same man, the timeline doesn't work. So there's no
That's
DNA
really
of
true
Richard
there
Allen's at
and
the scene.
sad.
There's no social media connection with the girls or with the scene, no digital connection with the scene, no forensic data connecting him to anything. It's taken the state 7 years to figure out whose hair is on her hand. Mr. Baldwin is clearly highly offended by this. Forensic pathologist is going to say that it looks like there were two different blades that were used. There was a serrated blade and there was a non-serrated blade. So Mr. Allen, in his confessions, claimed that he had killed the girls with a box cutter. But the defense theory is that this is supportive of evidence of more than one person being involved. So the multiple knives, the down the hill, voice not being matched by, the man's lips moving. And he says, you'll understand when you see the crime scene that it's highly unlikely one person could have done it. So at this point, Judge Gohl interrupts Mr. Baldwin sua sponte, meaning no objection from the state. She just does it on her own to tell Mr. Baldwin he's veering into argument, that the purpose of the opening statement is to inform the jury of what they should anticipate the evidence is going to show. It's not an opportunity to
I
argue
hope
what they
so.
should think the evidence means or the conclusions that they should draw from it. So she gave him that little admonition. Mr. Baldwin continued, it's a bizarre.
So again, going by what she's saying and what they're saying about it being more than one person, it does not make sense at all whatsoever that you wouldn't test a hair in her hand. Bear says that she was completely unreliable on the stand. I believe it. I believe it.
Scene, there's sticks on the girls.
Good morning,
and
Judy.
that
Thank
originally
you
when
for being
police were
here.
investigating, they thought that more than one person did it, that it wouldn't be feasible for just one person to commit this crime. So he concluded by saying, please wait, that Richard Allen is really innocent. Really innocent. So I had some thoughts about both parties' opening statements. Mr. McClelland's, as I said, I thought he delivered it very strongly, and he did provide some details that I wasn't
Hold on,
satisfied
I'll
that
look
the
that up.
defense's opening statement adequately addressed. He did certainly tell a good story, and the way that he tells a story in real time, yeah, it sounded compelling. It sounds like they have a strong case against Mr. Allen from a kind of emotional standpoint. You can sort of feel this pull of persuasion of, yeah, that sounds good, and that sounds like him, and that's the story. The bullet matches his, and then he confessed to all this stuff, and he knew details they didn't know, and he had the right type of clothing, and he was on the trail at the time. All of that, he was able to deliver in a way that made it very compelling.
Okay, hold on. Eek. So it says a trial can be ruled as a mistrial for a number of reasons, including a hung jury. The jury is unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Serious error or misconduct. A judge may declare a mistrial if there is a serious procedural error or misconduct that would result in an unfair trial, which I think they have, and manifest necessity. The judge may declare a mistrial if circumstances outside the control of the parties or their counsel make it impossible to conduct an impartial trial. This could include adverse weather, jury tampering, illness, or death. A mistrial means the current trial proceedings are terminated and the defendant is neither acquitted nor convicted. The case is essentially reset, and the defendant may face a retrial in the future. Mistrials are relatively uncommon, affecting about 10% of trials nationwide. I hope y'all could have seen that. I didn't see if you were able to see that. I hope y'all were able to see that. Okay, we're going to jump back into her.
The defense, I thought, did a very good job of kind of highlighting the differences between their theories and some of the flaws that they expected to be able to point out in the state's theory of the case. So to kind of foreshadow for the jury what they will need to be paying attention to. Obviously, Betsy Blair is going to be a very important witness for the defense. Mr. Baldwin used her name a lot. He wants the jury to remember Betsy Blair's name. But there were some issues I thought that potentially could have been addressed a little bit more strongly. For example, the car. Betsy Blair said, it looked like a Mercury Comet. Rick's car doesn't look like a Mercury Comet. It doesn't rule out a borrowed car, or something like that. So it's part, but I think it got much stronger when he pointed out that the description of the man Betsy Blair saw doesn't have any type of resemblance really to Mr. Allen at all. The defense did not rebut the allegation the state made that in his confessions, Mr. Allen provided details that only the killer would know. He didn't give.
Okay. Crazy says, and from memory, that statement was made 3 weeks after the crime. If I seen someone muddy and bloody and then found out a couple of girls were missing and red rummed, I would be straight to the police. No doubt. Exactly. And I think anybody that's using logical common sense would have. Trixie doesn't trust the judge at all. She's not unbiased. She, in fact, is pushing hard for Richard Allen to be convicted. I agree. We learned that when we found out that she wouldn't let the original lawyers represent him that were presented by the state, even though they offered to do it pro bono, which means for no money, because they believed he was innocent. And she found that out, and she said they couldn't represent him, in my opinion.
Get into specifics about what those were. And so it's hard to say sitting here right now the significance of that, because some details can be sort of innocuous, easy to guess. Other details might be more specific and more compelling if somebody knows that, and not the type of thing that you would know offhand. Um, the circumstances of how those details were provided is going to make, for me personally, that's going to be a big issue. That's going to matter a lot, because if he is telling them a whole bunch of wrong things before he tells them the right thing, well, this just looks more like guesswork or leading him down the path to get to where he's saying what they want him to say. And obviously, any type of feeding of information or suggestion or something like that from the people that he's talking to, that would be a big problem in terms of keeping that strength intact. But if they are able to show details that he confessed to that are distinct and that were not public, that's going to be very damaging. No question about that. So I will be very interested to see how those details end up fleshing out. We did get a recess, so Judge Goal is going to be far more generous with the recesses now that we have a jury. Now that she has a jury to take care of, we will get our 15 minutes in the morning, our lunch break, and our 15 minutes in the afternoon.
Yes, crazy.
But it's still very quick, not a lot
Bear
of
and
time.
Trixie, you're good, loves.
So the first witness that the state called was Becky Patty. This is Libby's grandmother. Stacy Dean.
Eek, I think they did require a mental health evaluation, and I think the mental health evaluator or the psychiatrist diagnosed him as having psychosis, and that explains all the false confessions. And it was to the point that they were having to give him his medication intravenously, which is basically through they had to give him shots because he wouldn't take his medicine. Like, that's how serious this stuff has gotten with him in
Diener
jail.
handed all of the direct examination for the state, except for the very last witness of the day that Mr. McLeland handled. So Stacy Diener handled the examination of Becky
Yep,
Patty.
there, exactly.
I'll give you my first impression of Stacy Diener. I mentioned she's a little soft spoken. It's hard to hear her, especially then she's also facing the witness away from the audience, and so really straining to hear some of the details of her questions. From a style standpoint, she's really leading, and it's not going to matter yet. Like, they're not objecting, they're not calling her out on it, because it doesn't matter at this point in time. But if they get to a point where it matters, it could potentially be a problem. Sometimes when an attorney gets in the habit of being very leading with their questioning, it's hard to shift if they get called out and figure out how to get to where they want to go through an open-ended type of question. That's basically why people end up leading, is because they're thinking, this is where I need to go. So they just kind of start there and ultimately put it in the witness's mouth. So you're not supposed to do that on direct. You don't get to lead on direct. You're supposed to ask open-ended questions. If the defense decides to start objecting to that at some point, assuming that Judge Goal will sustain an objection like that, which is kind of a who knows at this point, then she's going to have to shift her style, I think, pretty significantly from what I saw today. Becky Patty was heartbreaking to watch. She really was the entire time. She is still grieving. It's very obvious. This was very painful for her. Her demeanor was flat, uh, short answers, typically not really expounding and volunteering a lot or anything like that. Just even with the state, who's ostensibly friendly and supposed to be there advocating kind of for the victims.
Judy says, so his representation a public defender or outside practice? He had submitted a letter to the court. First he wanted to hire a lawyer, and then he submitted a letter to the court that we went over briefly on the other live we did where we were deep diving the case, that stated he did not understand how expensive it was to hire a lawyer, so he needed a public defender. And that's when the first set of lawyers, I can't recall their names, I think one of them was Rosie, came in and were going to represent him on the case. And then something happened. I personally think the judge found out that the lawyers thought he was innocent, and the judge called them into court and basically said that they're not allowed to represent him. anymore. And they offered to do it for without pay and to just do it because they wanted to represent him. They didn't care if they got paid or not. And she still would not let them represent him. And she appointed a different public defender. I do know that oh, that's what it was. It was pictures of the crime scene got leaked from the law office, but it was a clerk or somebody or an intern, somebody like that, that had leaked pictures of the crime scene, and it was only out for a couple of hours, and then they took it down or something, or something to that effect. And because of that, the judge would not let the lawyers represent him, even though they fired the person that did it and were trying to do it for free, and she still would not let them represent him anymore. There was a whole big issue about that. So yeah, now he still has public defenders, but it's a different set of public defenders. But supposedly the original public defenders are working with the new public defenders to try to help get Richard Allen out of this, because all of them believe he's innocent. Hi, Bambina.
So
Thank you for being here.
it was just hard. It was hard. It was really hard to watch.
Excuse me.
She just
Thank you so much, Bambina. Bambina says it's not Rosie, it's Rozzy, and it's pronounced the way it's written. And Richard Allen is guilty. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your opinion. Why do you feel like he's guilty? If you can type it in the comments section, if there's enough room for that.
she just was she was suffering going through this. So they described the background, the family, everybody who lived together with her and her husband, Mike, the two granddaughters, Kelsey and Libby, that came to live with them about 10 years before, about 2007. So when Libby was about 3 years old. Also, Derek, Libby and Kelsey's father, uh, Becky's son, and Becky's other son, Cody, was also living with them. So that was everybody that was in the house. She worked as a home appraiser and had a home office. Kelsey and Mike, or Kelsey and Derek, were both working for her at the same time. No, I'm sorry, not Kelsey. Her daughter. Her daughter is named Tara. So Tara and Derek were both working for her at the time. She worked.
Bear says the first lawyers are defending him again. I don't know how they worked that out, but it's Baldwin and Rozzy again. Okay. I'm sorry. That was some misinformation on my part. I apologize about that. I thought that they had been fired. I know originally they had, but evidently, like she said, they're defending him again, which is great. I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you for letting me know that and correcting that information, that misinformation I accidentally put out just now. Bambina said because he admitted he was there and three girls saw him there and he admitted he saw them too. Okay. And he was the one on the video made by Libby. Okay. I mean, I could see your thought process on that. I feel like there's a lot of other evidence to cloud it. Because I question the witnesses and I question if it really is him on the rich guy video really is Richard Allen, but it's possible. Thank you for letting us know that and sharing your thoughts and opinions on that. I love to hear different reasoning for why people feel different ways. I really appreciate that. Bear says, am I wrong about that? I keep hearing Baldwin and Rosie. Are they not defending him? I'm not sure. I don't think they are, but if you're saying they are, they could be. Crazy says, I cannot prove it was him on the video. I'm with you. I don't feel like we can absolutely 100% prove it, although the man in stature, from what I can gather, does resemble him. And again, like I said earlier, you have to question that bullet, but I think there's evidence to prove that he didn't do it, but I respect your opinion that you think he did.
He worked every day, just regular Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 types of hours. Had been doing it for
Tracy,
about
yeah.
15 years as of 2017. Libby was in 8th grade in 2017. Described her as very active, very smart. She did math bowl. She would have graduated a year early. She did sports, band, volleyball, swimming, softball, busy girl, soccer, pretty much year round. She
Thank you,
was always
Anders.
doing something. So her daughter Tara had two boys, two sons that were the same age as Libby, her cousins. So they were very close, did everything together, went to the same school,
That's good to
and stuff
know.
like that. She had a big circle of friends. She would spend the night with them. They would come over to her house. So Becky got to know a lot of Libby's friends, including Abby. Abby was a close enough friend that the German family took her on spring break vacation with them. We learned later it was down in Florida, so very close. Spent the night frequently. Mom.
So, True Crime says there's no DNA from Richard Allen. You can't convict a man with no evidence. Bambina says he admitted that he had the same jacket, which they found at his house. I'm not sure that they found the exact same jacket. I think it was the exact same style of jacket, but we did hear the witnesses state that the person that they saw originally, her first statement was that they were wearing a tan jacket and they were muddy. And then after seeing the video of Bridge Guy, she said it was a blue jacket and they were muddy and bloody like they had just slaughtered a pig. So therefore, they're proving that the original statement has now changed, which could be said to fit the narrative of what she needed it to fit. But like you said, I mean, he did say that he had the same type of jacket that they found that Bridge Guy was wearing. So both could be true.
Moms knew each other and communicated and so forth. So that year, Abby and Libby, they were
Thank you,
both in
Bear.
the band. They both played volleyball together. And Libby had just turned 14 in December of 2016. When Kelsey got her license, she would help out a lot. These are very busy girls.
Right,
They need
E?
rides all the time. So Kelsey would help out a lot with driving them around. Becky gave her a car. It was a cream colored Bonneville. That's a boat. And so on Monday, February 13th, it was a typical work day for her, but it was not a typical school day because they had the day off. And so normally Libby would not have friends sleep over
All
during
good
weeknights,
points.
during school nights, but because it was a day off,
Crazy. That's a good point.
Abby had spent the night
Bambina,
at their
that's
house the night
true.
before, Sunday night.
If we're looking at all
So they
aspects.
had breakfast. Libby was asking if they could do something. So she offered to pay the girls to help her do some filing, and then she would take them shopping. Kelsey said that she had to work, but Libby wanted to go out to the trails. So Becky told her you would have to get a ride home. She then came out to speak with Becky and told her that her dad Derek had said that he would come and pick her up. So she got permission to go out to the trails. So she came out to the office. Libby came out to the office to say goodbye to Becky, and Becky told her to take a jacket because it's warm, but it might get a little bit cold. And so the last thing that Libby ever said to Becky was, "Grandma, I'll be okay." It like even makes me tear up a little bit. "Grandma, I'll be okay." They had just gotten a puppy, and Libby had been sitting there on the floor.
That is a really emotional thing to have your baby, your granddaughter, the last thing she said to you is, "Grandma, I'll be okay." And then to find out that she had been murdered, this brutal murder.
Holding the puppy, playing with the puppy. She was wearing a tie-dyed shirt and gray sweatpants. Becky didn't pay attention to what Abby was wearing. She couldn't identify that. So they knew that she meant the High Bridge Trail because there's trees out there. Kelsey is a photographer and likes to take photos out there. They had always felt like it was a safe area, didn't have any concern about taking the girls out there on their own. They used to ride bikes out there together. This currently the path has been developed. It's got asphalt on it, but at the time that was not the case. It was just gravel. So the girls would always ask permission to go somewhere. Libby would always ask permission. She wouldn't just take off. She was very respectful of making sure that people knew where she was going to be and when. So she had a phone so that when her practices were over and stuff, she would be able to get into touch and let them know when she needed a ride and stuff. So lots of people were pitching in around the house with getting everybody to where they needed to be.
Bambina says, "Yeah, right. Aliens came down on a space saucer. There were no other males there except him." Well, we do know that the first sketch was of a very much younger person that was clean shaven and very youthful in appearance. And Richard Allen admitted he was there. That's a problem for me. Like, could he have done it and still admitted that he was there? Yeah, sure. Trying to make himself look innocent. Like, why would someone who committed the crime come to the police station and admit being there that day? But at the same time, could it have been the person that looked more youthful in appearance? And Richard Allen did come to the police station and admit being there because he really was innocent. would the person who actually did this go to the police station and admit being there? You know what I mean?
So fully expected that Libby would have her phone with her on the trail because she always had it with her. She never left it. She
You
never let
know,
it run out
true
of
crime,
charge.
that's a good point too. That next door
So she
neighbor
made
was sus
the
AF.
arrangements for her father, Derek, to pick her up. She made those with him. Becky was not part of that process. So that afternoon, Derek was working with Becky in her home appraisal business. He needed to go
You
out and
think
take
so?
photos of some houses that were like comps for an appraisal that she was doing in an area called Frankfurt. It was going to take some time, take a couple, 2.5 hours maybe. So he told Libby he would pick them up when he was done. And they left for the trails around 1:30. So Becky knew that the kids had taken pictures on the high bridge. She
That's
hadn't
true,
seen it
but
for
it's for
herself,
both
but knew
sides,
about it. She hadn't been out there
unfortunately.
herself. She knew that it was a trestle bridge, but she didn't realize how high it was, and she was surprised when she saw it. But she was not surprised that Libby would go out on that bridge because Libby liked
I think they were being sarcastic, but I mean, could it be? Yeah, because there was a female hair found in her hand.
adventure.
I'm
When they
with
were on their
Jenny. Looking
vacation in
like a lot of
Florida, she wanted to go
circumstantial evidence, in
parasailing.
my opinion. I'm with you, love.
She wanted to try anything once. She was describing Libby's character a little bit as being polite, but she would not be afraid to tell somebody if they were out of line. She had very good interaction with adults. She was very smart. Becky said she had more reasoning powers than I had as an adult. She was calm. She would say, I need to be a psychiatrist because all my friends come to me with their problems. She was a logical thinker. She loved crime shows, particularly one with a redheaded surgeon. I was trying to think of what this was. I have no idea what it was. I wondered if she was talking about Bones, the one with the forensic
Yes,
anthropologist. Maybe.
Bones.
I don't know. If there's a crime show out there with a redheaded surgeon, let me know what that is. It didn't ring a bell for me. But she liked that show and she said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to help people solve crimes or I'm going to heal people. That was important to her because her mom had died of COPD. She had good tuition, according to Becky. And so Becky's husband, Mike, is a first responder, and he had always told the girls to be aware of their surroundings, be situationally aware, pay attention to your instincts and things like that. So she heard stuff like that a lot, and that was ingrained in her. She would call if her plans would change or if she was going to be late or something like that. She was very good about notifying them. So about 3:30, then Derek called Becky and said, Libby's not answering her phone. He's here to pick her up and she's not here. Can you try her? So Becky tried to call, tried to text. Nobody was getting an answer. And this had never happened before. They knew Abby didn't have a phone and this just was off. They knew that this was off. So they decided maybe they needed to go look for them. So Becky called her husband, Mike, told him they were going out to the trails to look. Cody came and pulled
I
up as
agree
well.
there.
And so they parked at the trails and uh, they knew if the girls had maybe decided to walk home, there was basically two ways that they could go. So they checked those routes first. The girls were not there. So they went to the Mears Trailhead and parked. When they got there, Becky called AT&T and was on the phone with them a while to see if they would ping the phone. She said they would not do it. So she described the Mears Trailhead a little bit. There's a farmhouse across the street, a small parking area, that there were a couple of cars there. And when they walked around for a little bit and didn't find the girls, that's when they decided to call AT&T. So at this point, it was starting to get dark.
That's
It's
a
after
good point
5.
there.
Mike said we need to call the police, and they were concerned because Libby is afraid of the dark, and it was getting dark. Uh, she doesn't remember she walked all the way out to the high bridge. She remembers her
It concerns me that the parents called AT&T, the parents of the child who has the phone, so basically the account holder for the AT&T account, and asked them to ping the phone and they would not do it. That's concerning. Like if somebody is calling you and asking you to ping a phone that you are paying for that's on your account and saying they need it pinged because their child is missing and they need to locate their child, why wouldn't they do it? That is really sus to me. I don't like that. I think they need to change that policy ASAP.
grandson, Aiden, Tara's son. Libby's cousin was there too, but nobody was
I'm
found.
not sure, Shirley.
She tried to call Abby's mom, but wasn't able to reach her. So she told Mike to call the police and said she was going to the house to try to find her, to Abby's mom's house. So to get
There is
there,
a
she would
strong
not have passed
resemblance
the
between him
camera
and
at that
Bridget.
Hoosier. I already spaced the name of it, the store, the grain silage and everything. So she went to Abby's. She tried to call Abby's mom's uh, phone. Didn't reach her. Don't remember if she left a message. So when she got there, the grandfather was there, who said that Anna was at work. So Anna Williams is Libby's mother, is Abby's mother. So she went to the workplace and called. Anna called while she was on the way there, and they said to go to the police station. So they all met up at the police station, and police asked for a description. They asked for photos. She said she had last seen them at the house, believed them to be out at the High Bridge Trail. She described what they were wearing. She's very specific about black Nikes, that Libby was wearing black Nikes. Uh, Later on, she became aware. She originally said she was wearing gray sweats, but realized she wasn't, because she was cleaning up her room and she found the sweats. So she realized that she had changed at some point in time and didn't know. But her black Nikes she wore all the time.
Bambina, it was a psychologist, but the defense does pay psychologists to come in and do evaluations. Actually, I don't know if it was the defense team psychologist or the jail psychologist that diagnosed him.
They were at the police station until well after midnight. When Mike came back, they went back out to the trail. They drove around, continued to look. She lost track of her own car, not sure what happened to it in this whole process. They're continuing to try to call Libby's phone over and over. She went and got what AT&T records she could from the family's phones and shared them with the law enforcement. Just got them online and shared them. At some point, they went home and went back out early the next morning. They met up at the firehouse, where they were divided into groups. Each group had a leader for them to be able to do a grid search. So then the groups were assigned an area to search. Becky's area was just right down the road from her.
So, yeah, bringing up the fact that he was prescribed medication, I don't know if the defense team psychologist can do anything other than evaluate the client of the client. I don't know if they can actually prescribe medication. I would assume they can, but that would make me think it was probably the jail psychologist that prescribed, that said he had psychosis.
Her house. So again, just like if the girls had tried to get home, they were searching in the fields out in that
No,
area just in case something had
Bambina, they did not pay someone to diagnose him, but the defense team and the prosecution team will both have a psychiatrist to go in and do an evaluation of whoever's going on trial, is what I mean.
happened, or they had gotten overlooked. They were away from the trails. So she was walking back to her car after they had searched that area when a friend came up and said they found them. So she ran to her car and she drove in her car over to the Mears trailhead. She ran up to a fireman and said, "Take me to Libby." And he said no. So she turned around and she saw her sister Melissa was crying. And she ran up to Melissa and said, "Hey, they found them." And all Melissa could say was, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And she wouldn't tell her anything. So Mike came out and they went back to the truck. He sat her down in the truck while he went to talk to somebody. And Becky, at this point, she's confused. She doesn't understand why nobody's talking to her, why they wouldn't take her to her. Oh, man. And she saw the coroner's van go by. And that's how she knew. That's when she realized. Oh, my God, that broke my heart. Absolutely
Yeah,
broke my heart
that's
hearing that.
horrible to hear.
So they called the family up to the firehouse then and told them, formally that Libby was passed. It had
Could you imagine being a parent or a grandparent of this child and freaking out, like hearing that they found your baby, and then, well, take me to her. Where is she? I want to see her. Is she okay? What's wrong? Let me talk to her. Let me see her. And then them telling you no, and you don't understand why, and then you see a coroner's van drop by. I couldn't imagine. It's hard for me to even talk about. Good God.
had not even crossed her mind when they told her initially that they found them. Oh, man. So Mr. Baldwin didn't cross-examine her extensively. None of the family members were cross-examined extensively at all. He's basically just getting into their personalities. Was Libby the type of person who would stand up for herself, stand up for others, tell you what she would think? Would she speak in a loud voice, or things like that? He asked her about seeing flashlights out looking for the girls, and also confirmed that at some point she had been told about the hair found in Abby's hand, but she didn't remember the timing. She didn't remember if it was before Mr. Allen had been arrested or not. And she confirmed that just 2 days ago she provided DNA. She had provided it before, but she provided it again 2 days ago.
True.
That
Bear
makes
and
Becky happy.
marshmallow.
Stacey Diener did a short
Thank you,
redirect where she
Jenny.
clarified that the flashlights that Becky Patty reported seeing during the search was she was by her own house. She was away from the trails, and that she saw some while she was driving and in the area of the CPS building and the highway, but she wasn't in the area where she would have seen flashlights near where Abby and Libby were found. She also confirmed that her husband has long guns, he hunts, and that people in the family do own handguns, but Libby was not around them. She didn't have exposure to them. After Becky
Yeah.
Patty's testimony, we had our lunch break. We got an hour for lunch. However,
We know that he worked at the CBS at the photo department and had actually printed out photos of Abby and Libby for the parents doing the funeral and memorials and stuff. So yeah, that's a good point that nobody pointed him out in the community and they saw him. Even the parents saw him because they admitted that he had printed out photos because he worked at the CBS in the photo department. I think he was a supervisor, but I know that he had printed photos for them. I remembered hearing that.
we in the audience were informed that the line to get in, the line for the seats, it was going to reform after lunch. And so basically what that meant is that anybody, if they hadn't gotten in the morning, they would be able to come in and get in line. It would be a start over at that point. So it basically meant if we wanted to be assured of getting our seats back in the courtroom, we walked out of the courtroom and did an instant U-turn and got right back into line. And that is what I did. So no lunch today, which is fine. It's fine. I'll live. But Judge Gull is really she's putting us on the Delphi diet here, guys. If I get a little gaunt by the end of this, you will know why. I don't actually mind the not eating nearly as much as I mind.
I'm trying to get through this, but this is a lot of really important information. Opening statements. If she has other people come in, it might not be as important, but I might play this one all the way through since we're talking about open statements and witnesses. I want to try to get through at least 2 of them a day to get caught back up, basically.
She described that she crawled across on her hands and knees. She was terrified, but she wasn't going to let Libby go across alone. So she did it. She had not been out to that trail before with Abby.
Hold on a minute. Let me back it up a little
So
bit.
dehydrated. It's very uncomfortable. Don't like it at all. But it's just going to be part of what we have to endure in this particular situation. Because of course we can't bring any drinks into the courthouse. They do have drinking fountains, so that helps. I can gulp down some water, when I get a chance to get out there. But I tend to I'm not a particularly like neurotic or anxious person. And so when I'm in a situation where there's kind of heightened stress, heightened awareness, and like cortisol going on and stuff like that, it really affects me. It kills my appetite. I don't sleep well. So I don't suffer, like I'm not hungry. But yeah, that's going to help me get through these no lunches. So I did get back in. This time I was number 23 in the back of the line. So once again, scooted back in by the skin of my teeth, but I did make it back in after lunch. So the first witness after lunch was Kelsey Siebert, who is formerly Kelsey German. She is Libby's older sister. Described a very similar story as Becky. She herself was a couple years older than she was a junior in high school in 2017. So Libby was in 8th grade. She was a junior. She was 17. So she's 3 years older than Libby. She now has gone to school and gotten a bachelor's in psychology. She's now married, has a daughter, has another one on the way. So she described the school as being very small. Everybody knows everybody. She certainly knew Abby, knew that they were friends. Abby had gone on the vacation with them, spent a lot of time at her house, knew that Abby didn't have her own phone, and Libby always let Abby use her phone. She described Libby's personality as always the outgoing one and very brave. So she had gone out to the Monon High Bridge with Libby before. The very first time either of them had gone out there, it was within the past year. She says she was terrified and Libby was not scared at all. She described that she crawled across on her hands and knees. She was terrified, but she wasn't
Thank
going
you,
to let
Trixie.
Libby go across alone. So she did it. She had not been out to that trail before with Abby. So on February 13th, she had woken up late because they had the day off school. it came up that they were asking if she could drop them off at the trails, if they could get a ride back. It was not unusual for, again, for them to go there. It was a place that they felt safe. So she also confirmed Libby was wearing a tie-dyed shirt. She said she had given Abby one of her
Yeah, Jenny.
sweatshirts that was in the back, in the back of the car. She described it as a swim sweatshirt. I think she means it was for the swim team, for the school swim team, because it was brand new. It hadn't been worn. Abby was also wearing a gray zip-up jacket, and she also remembered Libby grabbing something out of her car. Abby was also, or Kelsey was also on the swim team, and so she described that she would keep clothes, like changes of clothes and stuff, in her car. Pretty.
So if the sweater, I would like to know again, which was it? Was it Libby that the hair was found in her hand? Because if so, the sweater she's wearing is brand new and has never been worn. So how would it have a hair? How would she have, like, if I'm going to go with she got a hair wrapped around her fingers from possibly her clothing or something. Well, the sweater's brand new. So if it was her, I can't remember. I think it might have been Abby, which would make this point null and void. But if it was Libby with the female hair in her hand and she had a brand new sweater on that had never been worn, then that doesn't explain like it being a hair from a family member from the house to me.
Pretty regularly, like had a box in the back that had different pieces of clothing in it. So on the way, they were playing music, they were laughing, they were taking selfies. Libby posted one of the selfies, and it's not a photo I had seen before. It was admitted as an exhibit. It's a selfie in the car that Libby took. She's in the front seat. It's a very close up of her face, so like just a partial of her face, and then you see the back seat behind her and Libby sitting in the back seat. We got a map to kind of get us oriented, show us where everything was. They're basically aerial, large, very big, blown up aerial photographs up there. Uh, we had the first that I've seen of Judge Goal getting on the state, chastising the state a little bit because they pulled out the big aerial photo and started to stick it up on this big easel. Now this is a big photo. When I say a big photo, I mean like no less than 6 feet long. Probably like 6x4, something like that. I mean, it's a big thing. And they stuck it up on
Oh,
the easel
wow.
facing the jury. Well, it hasn't been admitted as an exhibit yet. So Judge Goal got on them. You need to take it down. You can't display it to the jury until it's been admitted as an exhibit. This is kind of evidence 101. But hadn't gone through that step. So got a little admonishment for that. So at some point they passed that camera at the Hoosier store, whatever it's called. And she oriented us through the different places on the photograph, where the trailhead is, where the trail went, where the bridge is,
Right.
and so forth. So she was going to her boyfriend's house that day. She pulled into the entrance, which she described as very small at angles, kind of like a driveway. And there's only room for maybe about 2 cars to park there. So on this day, she pulled in, dropped them off, and then just continued on her way to her boyfriend's house. They went out for lunch downtown and then went back to his house, and then were leaving when she had to go to work. She described that the phone was always in Libby's hand. Libby's a typical kid, typical teenager, always has that phone in her hand, and that she was using it on the way to the trailhead. So after her boyfriend left for work, Grandma Becky had called after about 4 o'clock, and that's when she learned that Libby and Abby were missing. So she then went to town. I think I wrote this down wrong. I think I got the time wrong. Around, yeah, that can't be right. Around one, I think it says 6:40, around 6:40. Anyway, at some point, she went out to the bridge. The family, everybody in the family was trying to call Libby's phone. She ended up out to the bridge. She and Cody walked out to the high bridge and went across. Nobody else in the family went across the bridge. They went down after they got to the end and turned to the left and went down that way to get to the driveway that goes underneath. So we had another photo that came in that was just a blow up of this particular area, the Monon High Bridge, the little bits of trail, and the road that runs underneath leading up to Brad Weber's house. So she oriented us around that a little bit. So they crossed the bridge, went down to the left, down to the driveway, and then took the driveway the opposite direction from Brad Weber's house, which is basically going downstream. And the reason why they went that way was because they thought Abby's house was kind of down in that direction. And so possibly, maybe they had started walking back in that direction, but they didn't come across anybody. So they came back across the bridge. And at that point, it was starting to get dark. It was not dark yet, but it was just starting. They thought at this point maybe the girls were out in the woods. It really didn't occur to them that maybe something bad had happened. Kelsey said that she and Libby sometimes texted, but they usually would
I'm
communicate
here.
on
I had to
Snapchat.
grab
And
some
she was our
meat.
Snapchat expert for today. She told us all about how Snapchat worked. We watched a video that a drone had made, basically following the Monon High Bridge trail from where you would get onto the main trail from the Mears entrance all the way out to the Monon High Bridge and across the High Bridge to the end. This video was taken recently. This was not something that they took at the time because the bridge has since been changed. The situation is different out there. She described some of those differences, but the main ones are that now the path is asphalted like it wasn't before. And as you approach the bridge, originally you just walked out on the original, not the tracks, not the rails. What are the other parts of the bridge? Losing my mind. The ties. You would walk out across just like straight onto the ties. There's gaps in between them. There's no side rail. It's terrifying. But they've modified it since then. So from the end of the trail out to about maybe a third of the way, 25% of the way, something, a short way out onto the bridge, they have taken out all of the old ties. They have replaced it with a sort of Trex-like decking. There's a rail around the sides now, and it also cuts off at the end. So basically, if you walk out onto the bridge, you can no longer walk all the way across completely unobstructed. You will run into this rail. There also used to be a barricade in front of the bridge. If you were coming down the trail, you would run into this barricade, but you would just go around it. It had a space to the side that you would go around it to get on the bridge. That barricade is no longer there.
I feel like this is pertinent because it's describing the layout of everything, like how it was at the park, what they saw, what they did, giving us insight on the girls and their daily lives, their daily routines, all of that. I feel like the family's statements are very important because I want to, get an idea of the girls, and you get a lot of personal information from this.
Just catching up on my notes here. She says if you have walked across the bridge, this bridge is long. It's very long. It's longer than it looks like when you just walk up to the end because you see the creek, and when you get to the end, the current end of where it is now, you're still out over the water. You're still out pretty much over the middle of the creek. By the way, you can see the fish. It is clear. It is extremely clear, very clear water. But the bridge itself extends far beyond the creek. There's I don't know if it's a wetland area or if it's forested, like a low forest underneath, like a low area that the bridge continues to cross over. But it crosses over for a pretty significant length of time. Like if say the creek is, that wide, the rest of it is like, maybe that. So it's a very, very long bridge. She testified that if you're at the far end of the bridge, you can't see somebody way back at the beginning. So this is when she gave us a Snapchat education about how it worked, that you can text back and forth, you can send pictures, but things disappear after a certain length of time. If you just send a picture, it disappears after 10 seconds or something like that, but you can post things to your stories and then it will last for 24 hours. So she saw that Libby had posted some Snapchat.
So the fact that she was talking about if you're on one end of the bridge, you can't see all the way down to the other end of the bridge tells us exactly how close Bridge Guy was when they made that video.
Images to her stories. The first was a picture of just the bridge, and then the second was a picture of Abby on the bridge. This is a famous picture. We've probably all seen it. I used it on one of my first thumbnails for my videos here. It looks like the same day, according to her, because it had the timestamps on it. She recognized the clothing that Abby was wearing. She said if somebody saves the image or screenshots it or something like that, that Snapchat will tell you, it will notify you that has taken place. I didn't know that. I don't use Snapchat. I never used it. I'm too old for Snapchat. So then she said she didn't otherwise hear from Libby that day. Uh, so then she met up at the police station. She went to the police station after finishing this search at the bridge, and after that just went home, didn't go back that night, but they continued to try to text and call. The next day helped with the search, and her search group went back across the bridge and basically searched the same area that she had been in before. Only difference is they went down the right hand side to get to the bridge, but they still searched under the bridge and on the, if you're facing the end, the right hand side of the driveway that leads away from Brad Weber's house back up towards the access road. So they were searching in that area and were just getting ready to head back when someone told us that they had found the girls, somebody who was closer to the creek. She didn't know who it was, but it was somebody who was young. Uh, Later, I think learned it was there was a woman named Michael who was there that she had met at school before. She didn't know at that time, alive or dead, just that they found her. So she went back across the bridge and just reiterated that she had no reason to be concerned about their safety when she had dropped them off at the trail that day. Mr. Baldwin's.
That's weird to me. You found out that they were found by someone further down the creek, so you go back across the bridge and reiterate that you had no reason to be concerned about their safety that day when you dropped them off. Like, would you not go and try to figure out where the girls were, who found them, what condition they're in? I mean, I picture myself saying, where are they? Where, like the grandmother was. And then reiterating that you had no reason to be concerned about their safety. Well, how do you know their safety is in jeopardy at this point? I mean, they've been missing, but like, you're reiterating that you had they've been found. So why are you repeating that you had no reason to be worried about their safety when you found out they've just been found? That's weird.
Cross-examination was interrupted by somebody in the audience back in the back row on the far side. Stood up out of her seat with her hand up and was standing there for a few minutes. Judge Gohl eventually saw her, told her to sit down. The woman said, "The microphone is not pointed towards the witness." And Judge Gohl said, "You need to sit down, ma'am." Said this twice. She wasn't having it, didn't want to hear from the woman in the audience. It doesn't matter typically if the microphone is not pointed towards the witness. I think the person in the audience might have thought that these microphones would amplify, and because we did have difficulty hearing, that was part of the problem, but it's not. These are not amplifying microphones. They're just for the audio recording system, for the audio recordings that we're not getting to hear, the court records that's being produced as the record of this process that we're not getting to hear. But nothing else.
So they're not going to release the records after trial?
Like she didn't get kicked out of the courtroom or anything like that. She just, sat back down and the day continued. She described Hoosier Harvest, that's what it's called. So she described where the Hoosier Harvest was on the map, and so indicated she would have passed that camera after she dropped Abby and Libby off. It was right there on her way going into town. She also reiterated Libby was outspoken. She would absolutely stand up to others. She was not afraid to raise her voice. She had a good, strong voice. It was around 4 p.m. that she found out that the girls were missing, and the search was after that. That she connected with her uncle Cody, and the reason they went directly to the bridge was because of that Snapchat photo. So they knew that the girls had been there, and that was the last information they had about their locations. So she described this bridge as having such big gaps in it that like there were spots people could fall through, that the ties were rotting and stuff like that. And so that's why the first time she went across, she crawled on her hands and knees. I would not have made it. She said, "No way would you run across. You would not run across that bridge. It would be dangerous." So the picture of Abby, we spent some time looking at that. She's seen it, of course, many times. So the photo is taken where Abby is in front of Libby going across the bridge. So they've left the trail. They're going across the bridge towards the end. Libby is in front. She turns around to take the picture of Abby facing back towards the beginning of the bridge. And she can tell that they were not very far across because you can still see the water in the creek. Remember, I mentioned the creek is like this, and then the rest of it is like that. So Abby is still in sight, or Libby is still in sight of the water. So they had not made it very far across the bridge. She estimated it was about 25% away of the across the bridge, but the state objected to that as speculation, and that was sustained. So that's stricken. They don't get to hear that
Because it is speculation. You don't know exactly how far across the bridge it is unless you're measuring it.
specific bit. The photo, the Abby photo that she took of Libby, that Libby took of Abby. Gosh, I'm sorry. It's been late in the day, and I'm starting to get my wires crossed a little bit between not a lot of sleep and not a lot of food and being late and everything. Uh, the photo that Libby took of Abby, the defense introduced as an exhibit. They did something interesting, which is that they made a whole bunch of copies of it to distribute to the jury so that they could have their own copies. I say this is unusual just because courts can be real strict about the evidence and about how what the jury is supposed to be looking at and making their decision on is the evidence. And so copies are not the exhibit, they're not the evidence. It makes a lot of sense from a logistical standpoint for juries to just have their own copies. I had a trial once where we had all these exhibits. I had specifically this presentation that my client had put together. This was a case where she was a homeowner. She had hired a contractor to do a remodel on her house. She had paid him about $250,000, and he had not even finished the demo. It was really terrible. So what she had done is compiled a presentation of uh, the checks showing the different amounts that she had paid him at the different points in time, and then photographs of the condition of the house. Corresponding to those times to basically show, this is how much work had been done when I paid him this amount. This is how much work had been done when I paid him this amount. And so I had made copies of this presentation to be able to give to the jury. Well, the opponent objected, and the judge sustained it. I wasn't allowed to hand out the copies. Well, it turned out that sometimes you need to be careful what you wish for, because what I did instead then is I just hand published every single one of those photographs and those checks to that jury one by one, waited patiently while they passed it down, and everybody took a look at it with absolute horror and shock at what they were seeing. And it took so long, it got us to the end of the day. That's how the day concluded. Frankly, worked out great for me to not have to do the copies. My client did win that case, by the way. This case, they're going to be allowed to apparently have copies of some of these exhibits. Later on, Ms. Diener kind of popped up to say, can we make copies of our exhibits for the jury too? And Judge Gold's like, yes, of course you can. So they actually went during the afternoon break and made copies
I'm glad to hear that.
of their first exhibit, the selfie photo that was taken in the car. They went and made copies of all that for the jury too, so they wouldn't be left out. So you can see on the photo, there's nobody on the bridge behind Abby. She would see people from school out there all the time. This was a common place for kids to go. She saw two people that she knew from school out there when she had returned to search with Cody. I didn't catch their names. They were too low, but she did give their names. She said it was not uncommon for people to be on that bridge at any point in the afternoon. She said that she confirmed that the swim shirt Abby had taken out of her car was new. It had not been worn, but she said that they probably would have washed it. So what they're getting at is this is a possible explanation for the hair and how the hair got there, where it came from. Because if
That was my question, because like I said before, if the sweater was brand new, that doesn't make sense for it to have a hair from the house on it.
it's one of Libby's relatives, it could be Kelsey. It could be somebody else in the home, one of the other females in the home, and it could have gotten into the sweatshirt in the wash, and then transferred from the sweatshirt into Abby's hand. So we won't know until, of course, the DNA results come back. What that.
But again, it's weird that she reiterates when they're found that she dropped them off and they were fine when she dropped them off. And then for her hair to be wrapped around the finger would be weird to me. I think it had been said at one point that she was being looked into by the public, not the police. But she had done some questionable things, the sister.
That means, but that at this point is looking like a possible, if not a probable, explanation for the source of that hair. So a little bit anticlimactic after that preview that Mr. Baldwin gave us in the mini opening. She also confirmed that she gave her DNA 2 days ago, and it was not the first time that she had provided it. So we don't know if police lost it, didn't submit it, what happened to the first round of DNA, but we know that they did not test the hair until now. Yikes. The last witness from the family, from the German family, was Derek German. This is Libby's father. He was he spoke louder and a little bit more openly than the two witnesses before had. Becky, I said she was very quiet. She was clearly grieving. Kelsey was also quiet, soft spoken. She didn't appear as emotionally affected by the process as Becky did. Obviously didn't love it. But just different demeanor, more engaged, more responsive. Becky, like I said, was fairly flat and kind of short with her answers, very quiet. Derek German is more of a, a little bit louder, a little bit fills in some of the details. Volunteered some stuff, things like that. So he's local, grew up there around Delphi. They live just outside of town. At the time, he wasn't working full time. He was working kind of odd jobs, including helping his mom with the appraisal business, where he would take the pictures for her. Did a lot of helping run Libby around. He said she always forgot something at one of her practices or something like that. She's always forgot something. That got a laugh from the courtroom. She was in lots of activities, and so he was constantly running to bring her swimsuit, bring her food. She needs a snack, before her practice, stuff like that. So he would be going to the school a lot. So he did not have Snapchat, but they would text. He said he would try to call because he doesn't like texting, but Libby wouldn't answer. So I think they would just end up texting. Obviously familiar with Abby. He had picked her up the night before to spend the night at their house. The day before, he had picked Libby up. Libby had slept over at another friend's the night before on Saturday night. So he went and picked her up on Sunday. They picked up Abby and had the sleepover. The next morning, he made banana pancakes. He was doing something about painting a desk in the garage, and then he left to go take the pictures for his mother. And that was maybe
Another parent making pancakes.
20 minutes after 1 or so. He had 18 houses to photograph, so it was going to take a while. When he was about halfway there, he got a phone call asking Libby if he would be able to pick her up from the high bridge. So he explained this was going to be a while and it's going to be a couple hours and you're going to have to wait. But he did it. He took the photos and then went straight back to the Delphi area. On the way into the trails, he did not pass the camera at Hoosier Harvest. He came from the opposite way. So when he arrived, he had not been out on the trails or the bridge before. He's
Okay, so if there's an opposite way and he came from the opposite way and therefore wasn't on camera, why is it not that far of a stretch to think that one who did this came from the opposite way and is also not on camera?
not a hiker, I guess, didn't spend time out there. So he tried calling first when he was just a couple of minutes away. He didn't get an answer. So when he gets to the entrance, he calls again, still not getting an answer. Saw that there were other cars parked there. Siren going by. I don't know if you could hear that. So he started walking around the trail to see if he would find them. He ran into somebody at a junction point where multiple trails meet. So I mentioned when I walk the trail, you come in from the Freedom Bridge. This other trail comes in perpendicular is the Mears access trail. There's another trail that also goes perpendicular the other direction that goes down to Deer Creek. I actually walked that trail while I was out there too. It's kind of a small hill, like not steep at all, just a gradual descent down that takes you down to the creek downstream from where the bridge is. You can't really hike around much at the bottom if you're not going to get in the water. If you get your feet wet, you can go as far as you want, really. But if you don't want to get your feet wet, you kind of run out of room at the corner and where there's a curve in the creek, and you can't see the bridge from that corner. So the bridge is a little bit further down. So he met somebody at the intersection of all of these trails. Later, didn't know the man, but later learned his name was David McCain. He asked the man if he had seen two teenage girls. The man said no.
So Bambina, I don't know if you're still here, but there's another person at the park that day.
Because the man had been coming from the direction of the Monon High Bridge, he went the opposite direction towards the Freedom Bridge. This was about 3:11. He had looked at the phone. He looked at his phone data to get the time. So he walked down towards the water on the Deer Creek Trail. He didn't see anybody. He walked back towards the Freedom Bridge, didn't see anybody. He's continuing to try to call. So he went back to his car and called his mom first. She hadn't heard anything. He called Libby again, gets no answer, called the mom again, goes back on the trail. He's yelling the girls' names in all directions. He's not getting any kind of response. Goes back to his car, waits about 15 minutes, Nothing. So he goes back out and now he walks down to the high bridge. While he was sitting in the car, a couple of kids came back from that direction. Or no, I'm sorry, a couple of kids arrived and went out towards the high bridge. So I think he followed the kids out there. He did not cross the bridge. He saw the kids sitting on what he described as a little deck on the side of the bridge. There's a series of landings in different spots as you go across the bridge, where basically you have the ties, and then there will be a little section off to the side where you can walk and be off of the main trestle. It's about 4 feet by 6 feet. He described it, so about as big as the photographs that the state had in court to get us oriented. It was a boy and a girl. So that's all we knew about them. Kelsey and Cody then arrived. They said they were going to go across the bridge, so he went back to the car. Kelsey had parked there, so he got in her car and was trying to figure out what to do next. Then Mike and Betty came. They had to park outside because by this point that you can't fit any more cars in the parking lot, so they had parked across the street. Becky is making these phone calls to AT&T. He went back out on the trail, and at this point, cops and people are starting to show up before he made it back out to the bridge. It's still light out when they went to the police station at this point. So his mom and brother Cody went downtown to look around after the station, to look at some of the parts of the trail. The trail system connects to all sorts of different sections. Some of them go through the downtown area. So they went to check some of those other sections of the trail. Of course, didn't find anything. Again,
So this trail is connecting to all these places downtown and all over the place. I mean, the killer could have come from anywhere. Just because he wasn't on the camera doesn't mean that it wasn't somebody else, in my opinion.
Walked back out to the high bridge. It's dark now. And when he got to the bridge, not crossing, but on the near side, there's a wooded area off to the left. So he had his flashlight and he was searching over in that wooded area. Did not find anything. He was by himself. He wasn't searching in a group at this point in time. He described that area as extremely steep down to the water. And I can confirm, if you're coming up to the bridge on this side, there is no path down. It is a cliff. Like it's, I don't know if it's limestone or, what the geology is, but it's a cliff. Like it's an exposed bluff. You can see the layers of sediment and stuff. You're not climbing down that. It's extremely steep.
Okay, yeah, this is like, she's got a lot of important information in this one, so I don't know that I'll be able to pull up another one today. I don't know that I'll have time. But maybe we can pull up and look at the area, since it's on there. Maybe I can find it and we can pull up like the actual visual from the bridge, like walking across it. Yeah, it could have come from anywhere. Bambina says you can't access the bridge from another side. So that's yeah. I'm wondering where I'm wondering now, like, now that I've heard that this trail connects all through downtown, the dad came from a different way, like, again, does that, I mean, the killer could have come from anywhere and not even been caught on camera and possibly not even been seen by anybody. Like, that's not an impossible thing to think. I was thinking that there's a camera at the entrance to the park, and that's basically the only way in or out, unless you go through somebody's property or, like, come in through the woods, which would have made it harder for somebody to come in without being seen. But now that I'm hearing all this, it seems relatively easy to come in without being seen, in my opinion.
So he didn't go all the way down to the water. He stayed up on the high ground. He followed this wooded area down to where it ends in a ravine. The ravine runs south from a cemetery that is up in this area. So he basically covered a large section that is kind of west of and beneath the cemetery over to the ravine. The ravine he described as being too steep to be able to cross. By this point, it was midnight. It was pitch black.
I'm not talking about just the bridge. I'm talking about the trail in general, because they said it goes all throughout downtown and all of that. I know that they were on the bridge when it happened and were told to go down the steep hill. But I'm thinking, like, the person who did it, where did they come from before they were on the bridge with the girls? Like, how did they get into the park to where the girls were at. And now realizing that it's not impossible for them to do that without being caught on camera.
He could
Yep.
see maybe 10
Bambina.
feet in front of him, not very good visibility.
Exactly. Thank you.
But you could see all the way onto the other side. It has a high bank. And so they were continuing to search until about 12. He could see flashlights on the other side of the water under the high bridge. But he saw no flashlights on the far side of the ravine, the east side of the ravine. He stayed on the west side. He saw nobody on the east side, and that's important because that we're going to find out is the area where Abby and Libby were found. He went back to his car, went home. Next morning, went out to do the search, got in the group. His was the same area he had searched the night before, so that same forested area. They parked at the CPS building and walked through the Mears lot and basically searched the forest, alongside the trail all the way down until it met up with the bridge. His daughter was with them, went all the way to the ravine. He ran into his Aunt Melissa, Becky's sister Melissa. She was not in his group. He wasn't sure if she was in a group at all, but she was out there searching at the end of the ravine. She had come up behind them and said they needed to go back to the entrance. So by the time he got back, there were cars there. He could tell something was up. He could hear his mom screaming. Melissa came running off the trail screaming. He saw the coroner's van. He saw about 12 cop cars go by.
I want to take a minute and just put ourselves in the shoes of this father who ran her around to do everything for her, picked up her friends from school, took her snacks, made sure she had everything she needed for all of her little practices and everything, was there every day. And you get back and there's more cars, there's more cops, you hear your mother screaming. I mean, that right there tells you what's going on. You see a coroner's van. Like, God, I feel for these parents and the people and the family. God, I couldn't imagine. I just, picture myself screaming as well, hitting my knees and just screaming, because you realize what's going on. It's a devastating state of mind to be in, to think about.
He said his dad took Kelsey back and called her and told her what had happened. That was his direct. Mr. Baldwin again did the cross. He said he didn't know who was searching in what areas before then. Reiterated kind of the orientation of the trails and where exactly he ran into Dave McCain. His timeline is that 3:11 is when he made the first call to Libby. So this would have been when he was on the way, according to his initial testimony. He called, when he was on the way there, a couple minutes out, and then so he estimated it was about 3:25 when he was coming from the high bridge. And he saw the couple down there taking pictures. He didn't hear anything, no, screams or anything like that. Saw lots of lights between 10 and midnight. They were on the surface road facing back towards the creek. It was bright enough to illuminate the opposite side of the creek. There were tons of people out looking for girls in some flat areas during various parts of the night. This area, however, he described it was not familiar to him because he had not spent time out there as a kid. So this was not.
Crazy's older than us. You're a couple hours older than us. I'm glad that you're here this Monday morning for you. Sunday early afternoon. It's 12:26 here on the East Coast. Sunday for us.
Not a place that he knew like the back of his hand or anything like that.
Right, Bambina? I can understand that.
After
I want
Derek Durbin testified
too.
We had a few sidebars over the course of the afternoon, and Judge Gold has a white noise machine in this courtroom. I've never been in a courtroom that has a white noise machine, so that was a new experience for me. It is fairly loud. It really does block out pretty much anything that's happening. So what they're doing, they have the TV screen and they have another like screen kind of over in the corner. Like here's the bench. Here.
Okay, I don't feel like this probably isn't as pertinent. I haven't found hidden true crime. We'll start on the second day 2. Bambina, thank you for being here from France. I just got some lavender petals from France. that are organic that I ordered from France, and they smell amazing. The trying to find. Okay, so we need day 5. The so lavender is grown in France because it grows the best there. So if you get lavender from France, it like always smells amazing. Let me see if we can get day 5 while I look up hidden true crimes showing of the walking the bridge. Didn't mean to do that. Do. Oh, there is no day 5. So we're on day 6 of the trial. State's case chief. Yeah, I just made a bunch of soap with
Last
lavender
year, North Carolina passed
that came from France. It's amazing. Like, it smells amazing. Like, you open the bag and it's just wow. I love lavender too. It's so calming. I made soap with it, and I put lavender and clary sage in the bars. I put lavender petals, a little bit of lavender essential oil from doTERRA, and doTERRA clary sage in it, and they smell amazing. I'm going to try to sell some at a craft fair that's at the end of the month.
In the case this morning,
Oh,
somebody
Bambina's
needed to do
growing
it.
it. I
Somebody
love
needed
it.
to do it. Why not me? Why not me? So I filed it. So I did a
Okay, so there was no day 5. This is day 6. And while we listen to a little bit of this, I don't think I'm going to be able to get through all of it, but we're going to listen to what evidence was presented on day 6, which was the state's case in chief. I'm going to get hidden true crimes going across the bridge.
a motion for public access. I'm requesting that basically the public should be able to go in and view the exhibits on the same footing as the press, which to me is
I'm
just a
so
no-brainer.
sorry, Trixie.
No legal basis for any kind of distinction there between who gets access to information and so forth. But I also took it a little step further, and I filed a motion to request the audio recordings of hearings.
I'm so sorry, love. I couldn't
This is just getting
imagine.
ridiculous, guys. It's getting ridiculous.
I
This
wish I
place is
could give
becoming
you
a
a
shit
hug.
show. It's really getting out of control. Starting to become hard to avoid the conclusion that it's by design, that it's chaotic like this because that's how she wants it, and so that's how it's going to continue to be. Unless we can find some other way to get people access to the information, and the direct source is the best way to do it. The recordings are already being made; they're already a public record, so they should be available. As you know, they're not. So
That's
if you
weird.
head on over to my Substack or to my Twitter account, you can read that motion if you're interested in it. I didn't really hold back. Yeah, we're making a record.
I'll pull that up for tomorrow, and we'll see the motion she entered. Bambina, I did not know that. I spin wool, and I actually have a lot of wool put up right now from sheep that I need to Lord, I haven't spun it in a while, so I can't remember what it's called, but I've got to basically do it on the roller and brush it out and all of that. I've got some dyed wool too that I need to spin, but I didn't know if I put lavender in it, it'll keep moths out of it. I need to do that with my wool I've got put up to spin.
We're telling things how they are here. So I'm on 36 hours without sleep.
Yeah, I'm so sorry though, Trixie.
I'm gonna have to pretty much turn right around
Still
here
sucks.
and head
I
back to the
couldn't
courtroom
imagine,
if
love.
I want to get in tomorrow. So this is not going to be a super long one, guys. There's not going to be a ton to go over anyway, as far as the details of what happened in court today, because like I said, it was exhibit after exhibit after exhibit after exhibit. Not a ton of detail in the testimony. So I'm gonna try to get maybe a couple hours and then head back over there. Midnight-ish. I don't know, and try to get some sleep on the steps there. This is the life, guys.
Lord.
Who would choose this, right? Who would choose this life? Well, here I am.
I feel bad for her.
So let me go ahead and start with, of course, the really important stuff that I know so many of you care about. Mr. Rosie's on his tie watch. He had a great tie today. It was this orange, like tangerine kind of orange tie with a yellow diagonal stripe on it. And he was wearing that on top of like a very light baby blue shirt and a charcoal gray suit. It was quite flashy. It was quite eye-catching. Wouldn't normally think, orange tie with blue shirt, but really pulled it off. Mr. Allen was in gray and white stripes on his shirt today. So I know some of you are very interested in those kinds of details. Don't want to let you down. I'm still not able to see the socks though. I'm sorry. It's just we just don't have the greatest view of everything that's going on in there. So yeah, start off with this morning. I got there at 5:09 or at 4:09 this morning. I would have been there earlier. As you may know from last week, I missed Saturday because I flew back home. I had to watch my girl go kick ass, win her first fight. She did so amazing. It was awesome. I'm so glad I went. It was just a great event for
I have the
everybody.
bridge
We had
video
several
from
fighters.
Hidden True
Everybody
Crime
won. One
pulled
of our
up.
guys
We'll
got
go
fight
over
of the
that
night. Like
next.
it was just it was a great evening. But that means that I was a little short on time and sleep coming back. And I had this motion to write and I had to figure out, how this whole e-filing system and so forth. So didn't get out there quite as early as I had anticipated I would. And at 4:09, I wasn't going to make it in. I was too late. Isn't this crazy? Guys, this is nuts. I mean, this is really, really nuts. It's getting chaotic. And it's starting to get there's starting to be drama. So today's drama, the reason why I got in is because Julie Melvin, who's a local here in the community, been following this case obviously since it happened. I met her the first day that we were here for trial, and she's apparently watched my channel, likes my stuff. Thanks, Julie, appreciate it. And so she's got her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend are line sitting for her, and apparently the other person who was supposed to, who's getting the other seat that she had, she was getting saved, didn't show up, and so she had an extra seat, and so her daughter said, Mom, you got to give it to Andrea." So they did. They came and offered it to me. Well, it made some people very unhappy to see me going forward, even though it absolutely changes nobody's place in line, changes nobody's position. But it is what it
Well,
is.
dang.
So
People get
didn't
like
make it
that,
in the
though.
courtroom. Thank you to Julie. Really appreciate that. That was very generous of you, and also your daughter and her boyfriend
Right,
who
Ned.
are enduring the
I was
cold
gonna
and
skip it, but I don't know when
hard
she's gonna
concrete,
start.
sleeping in a crappy little travel chair. Started off his day when
I
he
think we're
decided
at
to
the
help
trial
out. He
now.
went to the jail, went to the sheriff's office, and was looking at electronics that belonged to one of the girls, but they were locked. And everyone went, "Huh? I thought the phone was out at the scene." We learned later that it was an iPad. It was a separate
Thank
device.
you, Net
But
Detective,
so
for
they had
being
been
here.
trying to get the record of communications, contacts, things like that might give them a hint about where the girls had gone. So after he did that, he was then asked to go ahead and help with the physical search. So went out to the driveway that we've heard about that goes underneath the Monon High Bridge on the south side of the creek. He searched a little bit of an area south of there. Now this is at night. This is now when he went in, it was about 10 p.m. to do the looking at the electronics, and so he's out now doing the search at about midnight. Because it's so dark, they have a flashlight, makes it very difficult to see.
If I could get there and be there, I would too. I probably wouldn't leave. I would have somebody hold my spot in line while I go potty and just stay there. I'd get me my camping gear out and have my cold weather sleeping bag and just be sitting hunched up in the corner in my little sleeping bag, just camped out.
See very far.
Oh, you're good, Nat.
So it's
Thank you for being here.
kind of setting the stage for how it would be really easy to miss stuff out there looking around in the dark. So kind of contrary to the point the defense is wanting to make, that the girls couldn't have been there because with this massive search party going on, they would have stumbled across it. It kind of sounds like, I mean, unless you pretty much step right on something, you may not see it under these circumstances. So he was out there in that area for the search for that evening, the whole night until it got called off about 2 a.m. He went back the next morning, and there had been something that stuck out while he was there. This is actually backpedal, guys. You're gonna have to forgive me. My brain is like not wired correctly after after everything we've gone through in the last 36 hours. Still that night, while he's searching in the area underneath the bridge, he sees something that catches his attention. So he describes these like blocks of concrete or limestone or something like that that are in a big pile under there, big sections. So he's climbing up on that to try to get a better look. And over on the side of the hill, he saw what he described as a disturbance in the leaves on the side of the hill that was exposing the bare ground, and it seemed odd to him. So he went to kind of take a look, and it's coming from the end of the Monon High Bridge and going down towards the left-hand side. So we had several pictures of this, and it just looks like kind of just like a clearing. Like if you had a rake, you got the whole ground is completely covered in dry leaves and twigs and stuff like that. So if you like kind of grabbed a rake and just hit a spot and cleared it all out, that's kind of what it looked like. I mean, it's just this little bare area right there with no real explanation for it. So we saw, like five photos of that.
There's a train bridge that I walk across that's not far from here. And after we get done with the live, I'll walk down there and I'll record myself walking across and then going up underneath of it so we can see like just for comparison, and it's really small. But I'll make that video when we get done with the live and put that out for you guys so you can see, just what a small one is like for me. I go out there all the time. Good morning, Sheila says. Thank you for being here and thank you for your comment. Sheila says, I just wanted to say thank you. I needed a drama-free spot to listen this morning. You provided. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you could be here. And I'm glad that you're here and hanging out with us. Thank you so much.
He was with a fire department. Somebody from the fire department was searching with him. That's who pointed it out to him. And so they just made notice of it, continued to search until about 2 a.m. and then called off the search. So they went home, rested, and came back out at about 7:30. This deputy said he had no idea at this point that they were investigating a murder. There's been many cases like this where kids, just kind of turn up missing, and so he's thinking, oh, it's a runaway, or they went to see a movie and wandered off. This kind of thing happens, but the kids usually turn up. So he showed back up at 7:30. First went to the sheriff's office and was tasked with contacting the landowners in the area to get permission to be on their property to continue their search onto the private property. He then went to he was heading to like a different part of the county road. We've heard about this 300 North.
Well, I'm glad
the
y'all
road
found
that
us.
goes past the Hoosier Harvest Store and gets you to the Freedom Bridge trailhead. It connects to Main Street. I can just tell you because I've been in that area. It connects to Main Street, and so you can head back into downtown from there. So he was heading in a different direction out on this county road because they had heard that there were a whole bunch of trail cameras. Somebody had trail cameras out on their property. And so they were going to go ahead and pull the footage. He was tasked with going to get it. But on the way there, he got a call from Sheriff Liggett, who called and told him to go to the cemetery. So he went there, and with Deputy Yoder, who we haven't heard from yet, but I'm sure we will soon, they walked, or maybe he was on Saturday. He might have been on Saturday. I forget because I wasn't there Saturday. I did, by the way, watch the recap with Lawyer Lee. It was awesome. So thank you, Lawyer Lee, for that. But I don't remember the names. I don't remember if Deputy Yoder was one of the ones who talked on Saturday. I think he might have been. So they walked from the cemetery down into the woods and described it as a very steep wooded area down towards the creek. And as he was on his way down, he passed a woman coming back up who was very distraught. So he walked straight towards the creek from the southeast corner of the cemetery. And so it would be on the far side of this ravine that some of the other folks have described. Derek Durman described this ravine as being kind of the furthest he could go when he was searching the woods, starting from the bridge and the bridge trail, because it was too steep to cross. He walked straight down to the creek and did not see the girls, but he was notified that the girls had been found. He got to the water's edge and was able to see 4 people over on the north side, a couple people directly across from him on the south side. When he was at the creek, everyone was pointing into the water, and in the water, he saw a multicolored shirt and a tennis shoe that was stuck in the roots of trees over on the creek bank, but still in the water. So we saw photographs of that as well, of just kind of his line of sight from his perspective there. So he was hollering. They were hollering back and forth across the creek with the people down there, and somebody on his side of the creek, on the north side, believed that bodies had been found behind them, but he hadn't seen them on the way down. So
I like the way she's describing it because it's easy to put ourselves in the shoes of the person talking.
So from his vantage point, he could see a whitish color that that kind of stood out, but he couldn't make out what it was. So he approached, and there he saw it was the bodies of both girls. They were both deceased. One was nude and one was clothed. and he recognized them from the photos that had been circulating. They both had large lacerations to their throat. The deputy is very he's worked up when he's describing this testimony. He's having to take deep breaths. You can just tell that remembering this, he's got a clear memory of it, and it is not something he is enjoying reliving at all. He says there's a substantial amount of blood on the bodies and underneath. He got to within about 10 yards of the bodies. There was nobody nearby. He did not do any life-saving measures because it was obvious it would be futile. When he described his walk down the creek, the path that he took, it was about between 30 to 40 yards away from where the girls were ultimately found. So it was about half a football field, third of a football field to the far side of that ravine. And then we later heard that it's not too far from the creek, maybe 40, 50 feet back from the creek. So Mr. Yoder was taking down the names of the people that were in the area. Gotta look up his name again to remember how to pronounce it. Giancola. I think it's an Italian name, Giancola, something like that. He had phone service, so he called Liggett, told him, and then he stood by to make sure that nobody wandered through onto the scene. Nobody got closer, he says, on his watch than within about 10 yards. The troopers were the first to arrive. They got there within minutes, and then they started like a crime scene log. They put up crime scene tape to seal the area. The things that they should have done in the Karen Reed case that we heard about that they didn't do. Yeah, these guys were on it within, probably 90 seconds or so. Within minutes, he said. And so after the crime scene tape was up, nobody entered beyond that. We heard over the course of the day that they taped off a very large area, like much larger than just where, like right next to where the bodies were, and that's basically what they're trained to do to make sure if there's things in the area, they don't want to overlook it. They want to have plenty of room to make sure that they get everything that's going to be relevant.
But yet are not submitting the sticks to the jury to see, or haven't presented them in the courtroom yet, and didn't collect DNA evidence, but they're doing all this. Why?
He said that you would be able to access that scene by crossing the water. And so he ended up staying at his post there all night until around 8 or 9 p.m. the next day when somebody came in to relieve him. So nobody came through. There was no traffic on the driveway. Nobody crossed the creek. Either the state or the defense, with most of these law enforcement witnesses, is now eliciting whether they were carrying a firearm, and if so, what it was. So he indicated he was carrying his issue firearm, which was a Glock 17 9mm. He said that the department had just recently switched to that gun. Before that, it was he didn't specify what it was. So all the officers now have this Glock 17 9mm. That's their duty weapon, and that had been within the last year that switch had taken place. Mr. Baldwin did the cross-examination. He wanted to emphasize how steep the area was where Deputy, gotta look at it again, Deputy Giancola, where he'd seen that disturbance. So you come off the end of the bridge and over there to the left-hand side, and it's kind of right up there at the top. It's very steep. Mr. Baldwin wanted to emphasize this is a very steep area. Like you would need to use your hands to hold on to trees and stuff like that in order to get yourself down. Very high risk that you would probably fall. The other side is not as steep, or at least that is what was suggested. So he was surprised to see the marks. Deputy
really
Giancola
is.
was surprised to see them. He just hadn't, I think, expected to see that. There had been
Okay,
marks
Anders, thank you for that.
underneath the leaves and the dirt. And we heard later from a different witness that these may have been some footprints, and that they may have been footprints that appeared to be consistent with, I believe it was Libby.
I like
shoes,
Grizzly too.
one of the girls' shoes. I'll verify that when I get to that point. He Mr. Baldwin elicited that Deputy Giancola, remember, had been on his way to collect the trail camera videos when he was called to go to the cemetery. So he asked if he ever then followed up and went and got it. He did not. So I don't know if anybody ever did go and get that trail camera video, but it does not sound.
Why not? That would have that could have possibly had the person who did this on it. Again, what the hell?
Unpromising. It sounds like that was just kind of left. He said that people on the opposite side of the creek saw the shirt. So I think he means on the south side of the creek, where like if you cross the bridge and go down over on that side, they had seen the shirt. It was right off the bank from where he was on the north side. He said he just described the scene a little bit more, seeing substantial blood around both of them. Libby had it all around her, all on and around her. Libby had it around her. He said Abby had it around her. He said he didn't remember if he saw any blood on Abby's body. Her clothing appeared to be wet, though. There wasn't like, a cutoff point, like a line where it went from wet to dry, where it would be really obvious. But just notice that the pants appeared to be wet. They asked him because he had been able to make that phone call to Liggett in that area. They asked him what his cell phone carrier was. He didn't remember if he was using his personal cell phone or his work cell phone. His personal cell phone carrier was AT&T, which is interesting because that's the same carrier that we heard that Libby used, Libby's phone. And he did not recall specifically for the sheriff's office. It was switched at some point to I didn't quite catch
That's
the name,
super sweet, Sheila.
Versinet or
Good
something.
morning,
That's like a
Daya.
subsidiary of AT&T, but he didn't know when that switch had taken place, so he couldn't remember what the carrier was at that point in time. But interesting, it would be if it was on.
Yeah, true crime. I don't mind. We talk about other creators a lot. I just would, if somebody's live while I'm live, I just ask that you not say that they're live. But yeah, we talk about other creators all the time and try to get their information out. If you have if anybody in the chat has a channel, please let everybody know so we can go subscribe to your channel as well. I'm sorry, Zyla.
It just goes to that argument that if the girls' phones weren't able to connect, it's because it wasn't because of a problem with the signal in the area.
Oh, Sheila. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
They did this with several witnesses, make a point of establishing that the area where the girls were found is not perfectly flat. It's kind of like this undulating area where they described it where you come down from the cemetery and it's
yeah, I'm going to video the one that's kind of up the road from here a little bit for you guys, and I'll put that out later this afternoon. And there's some people do get mad if you mention other creators in their chat. I don't, because I mean, as long as you're not like, hey, Grizzly's live right now, as long as you don't do something like that and make everybody go over there and watch, I'm good with it, because I like Grizzly too. There's several people I like. And we're all true crime addicts here, so if you know of a creator that somebody else might not know of, maybe, they can go check that person out. So I'm all for it, as long as they're not live while I'm live.
It's initially quite steep. And then you hit an area and it's kind of like you have a series of like step offs where it's high and then it's low and then maybe it's high again. That. So it's not perfectly flat by any means. It is still above the grade of like the level of where the water was, the elevation of the water. And so in this kind of up and down, the girls were in a dip. They were in a low part of the ground. The jury is who asked the question. The jury did ask some questions today. So they offered 2 questions to Deputy Giancola. Only one of them was asked. One was not asked. And so the question that was asked was, you said electronics were being viewed before the search. What were the items? What were these electronic items? And so that's when he clarified it was an iPad, that it was locked, and they were able to see numbers on it that they then called those numbers, and it ended up being Libby's family members. So looks like it was just kind of reporting the same information that maybe would have been available on her phone. Second witness was Sergeant Jason Page. He was one of the crime scene investigators with the Indiana State Police. So we heard from 3 of the crime scene investigators today, and they described their job: document the crime scene, collect the evidence, secure the evidence, store the evidence. And so they go through training for that. And they have kind of a relationship with the lab. They work with the laboratory very closely. They typically transport the stuff that they collect that's going to need testing and things like that. They transport it to the lab. So they work closely with the analysts and with folks like the forensic pathologist and stuff to kind of get a sense of what should you collect and what's going to be helpful and fruitful and so forth. Sergeant Page said he's processed probably somewhere between 950 and 100 scenes, and that's just as a crime scene investigator, not including some time that he spent as a detective.
Anders, a cupcake is like, instead of a cake, they make these little paper cups, and you can make like a small personal cake for a person or whatever. So it's just like saying I'm a cupcake. It's just like I'm a little cutie, and she said I'm a grizzly true crime cupcake. That means I love grizzly true crime. But a cupcake is like just it's like a little personal cake. A lot of times you make them for kids.
So he went out on February the 14th. He was contacted to ask for assistance. So this is after the girls had been discovered. He was not part of the search. So he arrived about 1:30 in the afternoon and parked at the cemetery. Describes kind of same thing. Walked down a steep hill.
Eek, go check out her channel. You
Found the
should be
crime
able to click
scene.
on her
Crime
name.
scene
Search
barrier
it.
tape. A lot of officers present, but not within the perimeter. And ran into the two other crime scene investigators. Inside the barrier tape, he described was about the size of a football field. So, like I said, large area that they blocked off. What they did then was, and in fact, Deputy Giancola had described this. They had this yellow rope that they tied around a tree, kind of at the edge of the perimeter, and then as they would walk into any area, they'd be watching the ground, looking to see if there was anything there that needed to be collected or monitored or anything. And as they continued, they would string the rope like to another tree to kind of follow their path. And so then that way that would tell them basically where it's safe to walk, that if you walked along this rope, that area has been cleared. You're not going to step on anything or taint something or anything. In the inside perimeter around where the bodies were, they described this as ground zero. And so this is just right around the areas where the girls were found. So that's when we started getting photographs. We got photographs of the scene. We got photographs of diagrams that were prepared. I'll show you. I'm a terrible artist. I tried to kind of copy the diagram. It showed where the girl.
All right, so we can see how it's showing the girls being laid out here. If you guys want to see, I can pull up real quick. As a matter of fact, I'll pull up real quick where they recreate the crime scene that we've seen several times. This one shows the tree being over here instead of up kind of at the top. That's interesting. I'll pull up the recreation from Mob Crew. I'm going to get it to where it needs to be.
Girls were oriented, where the sticks were placed. There were 2 trees on the diagram that he noted, and then 2 larger pools of blood, and then some small like driplets and droplets and things like that. And then
okay, so real quick, I'll pull up where Mob Crew reenacted the crime scene, and then we'll jump right back into that. Hold on just a second. I gotta remember which one it is. Yeah, it's this one. Hold on just a minute and we'll see how they were laid out where they reenact it. No, computer, I don't want you to do that. I want to scroll down. Thank you so much. Here we go. This is going to be Mob Crew. Please give him a like and subscribe. There's going to be a commercial first. Hold on just a minute.
I have a secret to impressing all of your video clients.
I knew it was going to skip forward like that. We got another commercial. There's a lot of voting commercials out right now. They want you to get out to them polls and vote. Oh, Basil just sneezed. I don't know if y'all heard that. It was so cute. Okay, I was about to say, you better not make me sit here through a 5-minute commercial. That's just uncalled for.
All
right, hold on.
Oh, just kidding. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so here's the
Everything up, all these 7 branches plus the
creation presentations, the best. Thank you so much, White Bulldog. And Olivia, thank you for all you do. Thank you so much, Olivia.
Okay, so this is
Mhm.
Mob Crew. The title of the video is Recreating the Crime Scene and Control Test from Delphi. We're just going to watch just a second of it. The first video he plays, this person from Steve from True Crime Web recreated the crime scene, and we'll watch that real quick and then jump
Of
back
the
into
branches,
the other we were watching.
and then as the not have the spoiler, I won't go into what our final video is there.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Okay, chat speed's great. Okay, good deal. All right, go ahead and play it. We've got a couple of videos set up. We did a couple. Well, you did a couple. I just edited, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
here we go.
I see you put some speed on me.
I did the first time, but then you know what comes up. So
I know.
Yep. And anytime you want to speak on anything, Steve, you go ahead, buddy.
Everything that I was gathering is in its natural environment. Nothing was staged. Nothing was posed and pre-laid. I walked around the scene, looked, and found to create these. Of course, Chris has sped up this video. The following video is in natural. This isn't my normal pace right here. I guess.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, maybe I guess wait until the second one, and then that'll.
Yeah,
This was kind of just a.
But even when I was doing what was reported as horns, whenever you get on up here in a minute, you'll be able to see that one of them stands out, the other one doesn't really at the top of the head of searching for those branches and things. But I tried to do everything, and I gathered everything up, all these 7 branches plus the reported horns. Probably everything was within 30 feet, and so I didn't have to go looking. And there's hundreds of branches and limbs.
Interesting, and
And they're not letting these sticks be shown to the jury. They're not bringing them in the courtroom. They didn't even collect them, which is weird.
Do show some of the crime scene, not the actual crime scene, but the location of where the crime scene was at, and it really mimics kind of that same area that you're in, which is really interesting. So the wind is actually, that's not wind, that's actually his drone, the propellers.
Yeah. I'm not scared to fly a drone in the forest. I've crashed.
Yeah, I'd be chopping down trees.
Creating this first one, like I said, and then moving around trying to get the other, and finding all the debris from the ground. Like I said, it's not hard to do.
Yeah. And then we also do a time trial as well. So this one's just kind of get an idea of what it looks like, what they would have came across, with trying to be respective. But that worked out perfectly because you had a whole mannequin and then a half mannequin. Is that correct?
Well, for some reason, I've lost half of another mannequin. I put jeans on and stuffed the jeans just with material so I could angle the legs more of what was reported in the image.
Mm-hmm.
Then I walked around so that.
So now we're going to get every angle from walking like around the crime scene, what it would have looked like.
You can see from all these different angles, and I have a lot more still images, and of course we have a lot more video than just what we edited here. But and it's important that for the fact that the different angles and different perspectives, wherever you're standing at, some of these things may change. The only thing that really didn't change, regardless of angle, was the asterisk. The other stuff, when you're looking at from different location, could disappear unless you're standing in a certain area, and it takes on significance. But otherwise, as you moved around the crime scene on those outer edges, it just didn't. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So here's the.
All right. Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't muted. So that's what basically they came upon when they were looking for the girls. Hold on just a second. Let me get out of this. Hold on just a minute. Let me go here. Sometimes it doesn't show me my history, like for whatever reason. I might have to go and search her through going to
how
the
big these
video.
things are. But you grabbed just what was nearby. So I'm assuming this is.
Yeah, hold on, let me go back through the playlist real quick and then pull it up that way. Oh, yep, it's right there. And I've got the bridge one we can watch, and then I'll recreate it with the little bridge that's up the road from here for you guys later, and put that video out later.
And then the last thing that was marked on this diagram was
Okay, and now we're back to Andrea Burkhart recapping the case.
Just area he described as like a disturbed area. So the leaves had kind of been moved, and the bare ground was there. And then we saw lots and lots of photos. Lots of photos. It's not pretty. Really, 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 really not pretty. Not pretty at all. So the way the scene was laid out, Libby was nude. Both of the girls were on their backs. Libby was like almost crammed next to a fairly large tree. It was like a twin tree, one that has a twin trunk. So it's got a very fat trunk. Her head is down at the base of the trunk. There's a very, very, very large tree limb, like 15 feet plus long, 4 inches diameter, maybe. I mean, this is a big limb that is kind of along the side of her body.
So she's going to describe basically what we just looked at. The Rex Heuermann case is really good. He's the Gilgo Beach serial killer. I want to do some videos on him too. That's an interesting case. He's definitely guilty. I mean, I have no question, but it's interesting. That's an interesting case I'd like to talk about.
So her left hand is up in the air. Her right hand is down, and her throat is cut. Her throat is cut. Yeah, really, really unpleasant. Abby was clothed. We saw photos of Abby later on. They didn't take so many photos of Abby at this point in time. They expressed that the reason why is because since Libby was nude, it was easier to see. Did she have injuries? Did she have debris? Did she have signs of like where there might have been places where evidence could have landed? And so they basically just decided to process her, and then looked at Abby second, because the clothing made it harder to see, the debris and things like that. Let me give you my observations. There were some notable characteristics, I thought, about the bodies. And so what stood out to me was a couple of blood stain patterns on Libby. The first one was what appeared to be blood flow from her neck going down her face. So kind of upside down. It's not flowing in the direction if she was upright and it would just flow. It was like towards her eyes, towards her nose, towards her mouth.
So like if she had been picked up by her feet and dragged, that would cause the flow of the blood to go up her face instead of down her chest. If her throat is cut and somebody picked her up from her feet and dragged her or pulled her, that would cause, like I said, the blood from the neck to flow up her face instead of down her chest, is what she's saying. Or that's the only way I can think of the blood would flow up her face, as if she was being pulled or dragged like that.
On her right thigh, there were several droplets of blood that had then run, and they had run perpendicular to her leg. So not like it falls down your body and then gravity takes it down and it's parallel with the line of your leg. It was going the other way. It was across her leg. So to me, these were very indicative of movement. At a bare minimum, this was indicative of these bodies were not in the position that they were found in. The girls were not in the position. Libby was not in the position she was found in when the blood was moving the way it was to create these patterns. Libby had quite a lot of blood on her. She had blood on both of her hands. She had like a bib almost coming down from her throat. She had some blood on the bottom of her foot, blood on her legs, blood between her legs. When she was turned over, she had blood on her backside. Abby, by contrast, was almost perfectly clean. Her hands when she was found, they were tucked into the sweatshirt, and they were in a posture kind of like this. Like the deputy described it almost as like a defensive fighting posture, like a high guard. So her hands had been inside the sweatshirt, that
That's
they pulled the
interesting.
sleeves down to inspect her, and her hands are pristine. There's no dirt. There's no blood. Uh, they review like her torso. You know, lift the shirt up to look at the condition of her torso. Pristine, clean, nothing on it. The only place there really was a little bit of dirt on Abby was on her foot. She was wearing, I believe, one shoe, and the shoe was partially off her foot, and so she had a little bit of like dirt and in the leaf debris, twig debris, things like that on her foot. She had some blood on her face as well, and very very horrifying wound on the left side of her neck. Um, I
So if we're going that it was done there where the scene of the crime was, then where is all the blood that came from Abby? I believe is who she just said had almost no blood on her. Where is all that blood? There's a lot of blood somewhere and it's not there. So where is it? If it happened there, please, inquiring minds want to know.
I will say a couple other things odd about this scene. You may have heard about the F tree. There's a tree that the way the scene is positioned, the girls are kind of in a V shape with respect to each other, where their feet are closer, but their heads are further apart. They're 4 or 5 feet apart from each other, like, you know, pretty close. To the kind of 2 o'clock maybe from Abby's feet, there is a tree. And this tree has blood stains on it. It has blood marks on it. There's one blood mark described as very high, and that is on the opposite side of the tree from where the girls' bodies are found. There's a second blood stain that's about halfway down the trunk from the first blood stain, halfway down towards the ground. It's on the side of the tree. So this is just a little bit odd too, because had the girls, you know, been killed in this spot, there's no way for the blood to get to the opposite side of the tree. Somehow, you know, that got transferred there, whether it was by a hand, something else, whether it was deliberate or accidental, you know, who knows at this point.
Why was there no evidence collected from that? That would have, if the killer was bleeding, it would have his blood. If nothing else, it would have his or her skin cells in the bark of the tree where the blood was. So why was that? Well, why was there no evidence collected from that?
There was not, from my perspective, there was not nearly as much blood at this scene as I would expect if they had been killed there, given how they were killed, the nature of
I
their
think so
injuries.
too. True
The
crime
only
addict.
serious injury either of them had was these, you know, cuts to the throat. So we haven't heard the autopsy yet, but pretty sure we're going to have a cause of death that's going to be exsanguination, or it's going to be, you know, I'm not sure what you would call that, but just inability to breathe and loss of oxygen and brain death and stuff. But there's
That's
going to just be
possible,
massive blood loss from
Sheila.
these injuries. The human body, average human body, contains what, something like 7 liters of blood. I mean, it's a really massive amount. I've never seen, I will say this, I've never seen crime scene photos of this type in an outdoor scene like this. I've seen quite a few of them indoors, like on carpet and stuff, that you would think, okay, well, it might soak some up, you know, and so you wouldn't necessarily have like a large puddle, large pooling, stuff like that. No, it does. It just does. Like, blood is thick. It really doesn't seep well into stuff. This ground surface, like I said, this is all dried leaves and twigs and stuff. This is not, I mean, and like a pretty thick cover. So this is not particularly, uh, you know, I'm losing my words here. It's just, it's not gonna absorb. It's not very absorbent. So I would have expected substantially more blood than there was at this scene.
I think so too,
The stain
Sheila.
is clearly focusing on the largest blood spot in this area is basically between and like 12 o'clock from the feet of both of the girls. It's hard to tell from the photographs at this point exactly how large it is. Of course, you can't tell, how far it seeped into the ground or anything like that. But I do notice it doesn't. There's not like congealing or stuff like puddles of blood will congeal. It gets pretty gross. So it's hard to estimate the size of this puddle, but if I were going to guess, I would say it's roughly the size of like a tea towel. Not like a full size bath towel, but the smaller towel that you use to what dry your hands and stuff. It's really not that big. There is a small amount of blood directly under the girls where you could tell it would have seeped. It would have seeped out from their injuries, but that also nowhere near the volume of blood of the human body. So this is raising a lot of questions for me. I'm definitely going to want to hear more about this because
it's raising a lot of questions for me too. Because if it was done there, like she's saying, there would have been a lot more blood. Where is all this blood at?
just to me, my view, my eye, no, it doesn't look like they were killed there. Not to me. Not to me. And then there's just these other circumstances with how the blood had flowed, where it was on the trees and stuff like that just they don't add up to a simple story of he had the girls down there, killed them quickly, and went about his way in 15 minutes. It just doesn't look like that at all. I did try to watch the jury a little bit while we were seeing all these photographs. Wanted to see how they took it in. Most of them were pretty stoic. There was a couple of moments. There's a man in the front row who basically, when these photos would come up, he would have his hand over his mouth. He would sit with his hand over his mouth while he watched the whole thing. And then at one point, one of the men in the back row, I saw him kind of wiping his eyes. Everybody else seemed pretty stoic. The only moment was at one point the witness was narrating the photographs as we saw them, describing what we were seeing and why they took the picture and what was important and so forth. And at one point, they advanced the photo before they were really ready to, and the advance was to a close up, very close up of Libby's face and her neck wound, and the whole courtroom just because it was horrible. It was really horrible.
Oh my God, I couldn't imagine. And her family's there.
So he described using some of the chemical testing the following day to look for any other blood stains, body fluids, things like that. They use this like glucocrystoviolet, which is it's a reagent. It will react to the blood and make it kind of change color and texture and stuff. And so they use that to develop the F tree, the one that has the blood stains on it. Can't really see real clearly these blood stains. I can see why the defense was arguing that it looked like a rune, or it looked like some type of deliberate pattern. It did not look like a random smear. It had a certain kind of linear structure to it. But it is very hard to say, especially given the canvas, so to speak, is a tree trunk. It's got rough bark and stuff. He testified that he was carrying his Glock 19 9mm, that he has also has a Sig Sauer 227 45 caliber, does not own a 40 caliber. So none of the law enforcement officers at the scene today fessed up to having a 40 caliber firearm. And so that's obviously, they are establishing that they closed the perimeter, so they didn't have any random person walking through. And the folks that were there on the scene were not the source of that bullet, that cartridge that was found, because they didn't carry that firearm. So we had our lunch break. We didn't get a morning break. It's just things moved too quickly. So we had a long lunch, and when we
I'm going to skip through a little bit of this.
An awful lot of variables involved in estimating a time of death, which is very
Okay.
true, especially with things like body temperature, because the body temperature can be affected by the outside temperature. It's a general, like, people generally lose their body heat at the same rate, but it can depend on if you're clothed, if you're not clothed. So just a lot of different factors.
Oh, wow, Anders.
He did indicate that the reason why they did not take core body temperature samples from the girls was because they essentially, what he's saying is they don't know if they're dealing with a sexual assault. And so if they're dealing with that, to take the core body temperature, you have to intrude into the abdomen. They don't want to do that because that can potentially interfere with that other type of evidence. So that is why, according to him, they didn't take the core body temperature of the girls. Mr. Rossi was asking if he knew about breaches of the crime scene, about photos being leaked to the public in the early days, photos of the crime scene, that somebody took photos of the bodies and disseminated them, or that other information about the crime scene was leaking. The officer indicated he didn't know anything about that. Seems that Mr. Rossi knows something that we may not hear about until the defense case, but it sounds like he's got some information about just information leaking out. And he wants that to be the case because the more information is out there in the public, then the less likely it is that whatever Mr. Allen included in his incriminating statements and his confessions that Mr. McClelland has characterized as being details that only the killer would know. The more public information there is out there about the scene and about the bodies and so forth, the less likely that it is in fact unique information.
That's important. And I also, without us being able to see what he admitted to or his confessions were, the police didn't say that. So I question whether he even said those things at all, number one. Number two, I talked about earlier how it was an intern or somebody in their law office that supposedly leaked the photo, I believe.
They did try to collect some DNA at the scene, but that was somebody else. He was not aware of any DNA connecting Mr. Allen to the scene, and that is consistent with what we heard in the opening statement. There's really nothing tying him there. They checked multiple times to look for body fluids, things beyond blood, looking for semen, saliva, sweat, stuff like that typically shows up through these. You use these reagents or with a light. They described using an alternative light source, which is basically like a blue light, and then they wear orange or yellow like filter goggle that enables them to see the fluorescence of the body fluid. So they're using this ALS process. They're not seeing any body fluid, but the one guy who isn't wearing the goggles, he keeps seeing something glitter while they're, shining the light over it. And so the glitter is the bullet, the cartridge. The cartridge is partially buried underneath some leaves. He described that they removed leaves to be able to get a clear view of it. And it's kind of at like a 45-degree angle into the ground. This is the primer end. You never actually see the bullet end of this cartridge. It's not visible from that orientation, and they didn't take any photographs of it when they took it out of the ground. This was a big point.
That's weird. Almost like it was shot into the ground.
That came up in cross-examination. Both Mr. Rossi and Mr. Baldwin were emphasizing, like, shouldn't you photograph or maybe like videotape, taking it out of the ground just so you have a good record. The witnesses were all pretty adamant. No, you don't do that. No, it's not necessary. No, your job as a crime scene investigator is to secure it, label it, get it to the lab, and then the lab is who will do that documentation of
That's
the condition of
bullshit.
it. So the defense is clearly
They absolutely do take pictures and video of everything.
trying to raise some questions about
bullshit.
The ability to be sure that the integrity of this piece of evidence. Is it in the same condition when it gets to the lab as it was when it was initially in the ground? But they haven't, as far as I can tell, really identified anything that was a problem with the bullets. Don't know if they're leading up to the markings on the bullet, maybe being somehow related to handling or something like that. Ultimately, my view is that line of cross-examination really wasn't landing. The witness conceded that yes, it did appear that the sticks that were on both Abby and Libby, they were placed there deliberately, clearly placed there deliberately by human hands on top of the girls. And you can tell just from the image that no, this is not a concealment. This is not like somebody tried to cover them up to make them hard to find, because they were still nearly entirely visible. So the placement of the sticks is odd from my perspective. The law enforcement officers didn't necessarily want to concede that it was weird, but they did concede, yes, they were there. They were placed by human hands. They did not collect any trace evidence from those sticks. That bothered me. I didn't like that. If you know that the human hands, almost certainly the human hands of the person that killed these girls, touched these sticks to put the sticks on their bodies, that's where you should be looking for trace DNA.
Exactly. Why aren't you? That is sus AF.
Things that are areas where you have a strong suspicion that the killer or the suspect would have touched. They didn't do that. Initially, what they did is he described they picked up the branches and kind of turned them over after they've photographed and documented the scene and everything. They turn over the branches. They're looking for additional evidence. Didn't really see any, so they just went ahead and threw these sticks kind of in a pile over to the side and left them. And then about maybe 3 weeks later, he's testified sometime in March. I couldn't hear the date exactly. I think it was in the ballpark of like the 6th, but it was in March. They were sent back to go in and retrieve the sticks. So dispute at some point between people about whether these sticks had evidentiary value or not. Haven't heard anything to this point that anything was ever recovered from them, but it's just unfortunate because yeah, they're out in the weather for 3 weeks. DNA does degrade environmentally pretty rapidly. You use woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah, I'm with her. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But like, how in the hell does a trained police officer not collect something that is laying directly on top of the body? What the actual fuck?
And that's definitely a defense theme of this investigation. That they made mistakes, didn't do things that they should have done, and they really hammered on this one as something that should have been done differently.
Well, yeah.
The weather, got the report. The weather was a high of 57 degrees and a low of 34. That was on the 13th. Could not remember if the 14th was higher. These crime scene investigators did not take any measurements of the depth of the creek. So we saw a lot of photographs of the creek. The water is significantly higher than it is than just when I went out there, a week and a half ago. When I went out there, I remember looking at this river and this little creek and thinking, gosh, I heard people canoe on this. Like you can't canoe on this. There's not enough water, not enough water to canoe. You're going to bottom out. In these photographs from the 14th, in particular, it's high. I mean, the water is all the way to the edge of the banks. Creeping up the banks a little bit. So quite a lot of water, but nobody did take any measurements of it. They photographed some shoe impressions. There were, we didn't see these. They've just been described to us so far. So I don't know if they're going to come in, but we heard about shoe impressions on the south side of the creek, and then a couple on the north side over along the bank. They were.
Yeah, I wonder if they can even reference the sticks looking like runes. I think that Odinist theory is a possibility, so therefore it should be brought up to the jury. Like I said earlier at the beginning of the lab, everything should be brought up to the jury. Every piece of evidence you have.
Skeptical of the value of these shoe prints because of the search. Just the fact that so many people had been going through this area in the course of that search, that it was just maybe not going to be feasible to rule out who they were, just expect there to be integrity in that. This particular trooper Page had suggested and made a recommendation to bring in a blood spatter expert based at least in part on the stain on the F tree. He agreed that it seems like it might have been an intentional marking and not a random spatter. So he recommended a blood spatter expert to go in and analyze that, but that did not occur until this last spring. Just one more thing being left till the 11th hour.
Yep.
Mr. Rozzi then made a point to bring out how long does it take to get DNA testing done. he got into a real back and forth with this witness who didn't want to really give him anything. This witness was a hard nut to crack. He was very willing to not know things, to not understand questions, to answer things his own way. And so this back and forth was not particularly fruitful. He was just really trying to make the point that if you had wanted to send off the hair that was found in Abby's hand for DNA testing, could have done that a lot earlier, gotten results and stuff like that. There's no need for that to take 7 years. The best he got was an estimate that sometimes a DNA analysis might take a couple weeks. And sometimes there's a rush. I wish DNA analysis only took a couple of weeks where I am. Lord, it takes 6 months or more. It's really super backed up.
I'm going to stop this right here because I am going to have to go, and I want us to look at the bridge real quick because I might not even need to go do a comparison. Crazy says, so how long was the bullet there for? Could have been there from before the deaths. And I think so too, especially if it's down in the ground like that at an angle. Like, how did it get down in the ground at an angle like that? So we're halfway through that one. We'll pick back up on that tomorrow and keep going until we catch up with everything on the Richard Allen trial so far. We're going to look at this. This was what I think it was Bambina who said where she goes over the bridge. So this is going to be hidden true crime.
Around and learn a little bit more about what is written in the probable cause, as well as head to the Monon High Bridge. And I also want to check out the CVS. Let's go see where Richard Allen worked. Let's put some context to what we know. So here is the courthouse. We are in historic downtown Delphi, and let me show you exactly how close the CVS is to everything. And that is where, again, Richard Allen worked. So really quickly, look over here, and we have the Carroll County Sheriff's Office right here. We're driving past it. Okay. And then you keep going down, where it's like we're kind of heading out of Delphi, but look at this. Here is the...
Again, this is Hidden True Crime. The video is titled Delphi Murders, Retracing Bridge Guy's Route, Monon High Bridge Trail, Cemetery, and Key Locations.
CVS, where Richard Allen worked and where he printed photographs for the girls' memorial for the family. So when Doug Carter stated in 2019 that the alleged killer was hiding in plain sight, he wasn't joking. We're talking a block from the sheriff's office in Delphi, Indiana. Again, Carroll County Courthouse, where people are, you can see the news there, people are camping out there at night, including yours truly. Okay, we are now driving closer to the Monon High Bridge. We really haven't driven that far. All right, so we just turned onto County Road 300 North, and we're going to drive. Let me show you guys. I'm going to take you everywhere so you guys can get context with what's in the probable cause and what Pat Brown explained Saturday on the stand. He is the witness who's bound Abby and Libby. So obviously we're headed to the Monon Bridge Trail. As we approach right here, this is actually, see the parking sign right here? This is where the public typically parks, pulling in. If anybody was worried, I'm not driving. I have a friend driving. So this is where the public typically parks. Really quickly, Richard Allen did not park here, and nor did Kelsey drop Abby and Libby off here. But just to understand where a lot of witnesses were parked and how you would actually get to the bridge, that is the Freedom Bridge right there. And then keep going, and I'll just jump out really quickly so you guys can get an idea of this trail. Okay, so again, here we are at the Delphi Historic Trails right here.
I'm really glad she did this, but I don't think it's going to show walking across the bridge. That's why I wanted to show you guys what it's like, because it's scary at the one that's down the road from the house here, and it is steep. I go down there a lot to get herbs and things because it's like a floodplain. After it rains, there's lots of mushrooms and stuff down there that I like to go look for. And I really want to show you guys what it's like standing on a bridge like that. It's scary.
Parking area. This is where people typically park. That's the Freedom Bridge. You go across there to get to the Monon High Bridge. I want to explain where Abby and Libby were dropped off and where Richard Allen parked. So I'm going to get back in the car and keep taking you guys with me. All right, I just got back in the car and now we're going to leave the parking lot where the public access gets to the Monon, where the public access leads to the Monon High Bridge, and we're going to drive this way now.
I agree,
and point out where actually Richard Allen claims that he parked that day, or I should say, Richard Allen actually says that he parked at a place that doesn't exist, but in the probable cause, they believe that what he meant was the Old Child Protective Services building, because a couple of witnesses, oh, seatbelt, hold on. All right, seatbelt on. So the Old Child Protective Services building is where a couple of witnesses actually saw a car parked discreetly. We've just left. It's okay. We just left so there's the Freedom Bridge right there, by the way, everybody. Yeah, right there. And we're driving, and where is the building? No, the building doesn't exist anymore, right? We can speed this up too for people as we drive, but I want to keep it going so that people can see. Okay, so there is the Freedom Bridge right there on the other side. And look, guys, this is where the Old Child Protective Services building was. It doesn't exist anymore. They've taken it down. All right, so here I am, and just for context, you guys can see the Freedom Bridge right there. We were on the other side of the Freedom Bridge, right where the public access to the Monon High Bridge Trail is. So we've come around here. This is where the Old Child Protective Services building was, the old CPS building, where witnesses say, and this is according to the probable cause, witnesses say that they saw a car parked discreetly behind the Child Protective Services building, which is again not here. In the probable cause, Richard Allen admits to parking at the old Farm Bureau building. Now, the Farm Bureau building doesn't exist, and in the probable cause, they say it never existed, and they assume that Richard Allen means this old building, which is no longer standing here in 2024. But
we read the probable cause affidavit on our deep dive. I need to put that out for you guys so you have it.
That would actually put Richard Allen here with his car. I mean, that's his alibi, was that, yes, he was on the trail at the same time that Abby and Libby disappeared. So this point is really important. This is where where police say Richard Allen's car was parked that day. No other cars here but his. All right, so we're getting back in the car, and now we're going to drive to where the girls were actually dropped off. So where Kelsey, Libby's sister, says that she dropped Abby and Libby off this afternoon. So back in the car, again, that's where the old CPS building was, right back there. We just left, so we're driving along. Delphi is quite beautiful. I can understand why the girls were wanting to. I understand why the girls were wanting to go out. Let me roll this back up so you can hear a little bit better. All right, so right here, pull over right here, because isn't this Farms? And that's Muir Farms, where they say the girls drop off, and we believe that Kelsey pulled over right here, right in this spot, and sort of kind of just pulled off. And right through there, you can get to the trail. So if you pull up just a little bit more, you can kind of see how this little area leads to the Monon High Bridge. Keep pulling up so you can see the farm here. And so the girls would have just walked down and been on the trail, and Kelsey would have just continued, turned around, and headed to her boyfriend's house, which is what she said she did after dropping Abby and Libby off for a fun day hiking. So we just passed where the girls were dropped off for the hike, and we'll just keep going down this way. Where are we going next? The cemetery. So this is actually really important, and Pat Brown in his testimony Saturday morning brought up the cemetery. He is the one, here we are, who found Abby and Libby's remains. And so he pulled in here. We'll pull in as well. And once we get to the end here, we'll go park, and then I'll jump out and show you guys exactly where the girls' remains were found according to Pat Brown's testimony and the probable.
So we were just hearing about all this with Andrea, I think is her name, Miss Burkhart or Bernhardt, the one we were just watching. Good morning, Content Angel. I'm glad to see you here. We're almost done with today's live, but like I said, I'm going to put out a video of walking across the little bridge that's a lot smaller. That's up the road from my house, so you guys can kind of see what it's like.
So here we are in the cemetery, and as you can see here, we came all the way to the end of the cemetery. Now, according to the testimony by Pat Brown on Saturday morning in court, he's the one who found Abby and Libby's remains. He actually says that he came down here through the cemetery and then come right over here, and let me show you. He says he came through the cemetery. Clearly now, as you can see, there's a barbed wire fence here. That was not here in 2017. This was Tuesday, now February 14th, 2017. Pat Brown called off work to help look for Abby and Libby. He came down here. He says that the girls' remains were about 40 yards past the cemetery. He said that he followed, come right over here. There is a ravine right down here. And Pat Brown says that he followed the ridge all the way down. And here's the ravine. And so he was following the ridge. He went down, and then he stated that where he found the girls' bodies, you could see Deer Creek, the river. The girls actually, and I'll show you on the map, had to have like crossed back over the river or the creek, excuse me, with Richard Allen. And that's, I think, an interesting part of the story. And again, if you don't recall, some of their clothing, not all of it, but some of their clothing was found in that creek. And Pat Brown and other witnesses found some of those articles of clothing. So again, we just left. We are just leaving the cemetery, and I'm going to show you guys just how far away Ron Logan's house is. Ron Logan's house, again, to remind people, he was searched by police. He was a suspect for a time, never arrested. He is now passed away, but the girls technically were found on his property. This is where his house is located, just a little bit further right here. This is,
I think that he had something to do with it.
or was, Ron Logan's residence. All right, so if Richard Allen was indeed parked here at the old Child Protective Services building, let me tell you where I think he actually entered the trail. Let's go down this way, drive this way really quickly. And then after this, of course, I'll show you where the girls entered at Mears Farm. So I believe that it was right here, right there. Do you see? Let me roll down the window here. Right there. That's where I believe that Richard Allen likely entered, if that was his car parked there, and he was indeed at the trail that day, according to a police interview back in 2017. He told police he was at the trail and that he parked at the Farm Bureau building, which they all believed was that place. This is where I speculate he entered the trail. So we just parked at the Mears Farm entrance where the girls were dropped off, and we're going to take their route, actually, to what we believe is their route to the Monon High Bridge. So come right this way. So we're going to actually take you guys the whole way. Maybe we'll speed this up, but we want to take you guys with us. So I'll grab that from you, and we'll keep on going. Right over here is a memorial set up to remember the girls. Here, Abby and Lynn.
I'm really glad they did that.
I have never met you nor interacted with you. You've never heard of me, but you have guided me, it states. The circumstances of me hearing about you weren't what they should have been. However, the legacy and joy you both brought to this world is something that I will always aspire to bring. In y'all's honor, love, devotion, wit, brains, and happiness is what this world needs. I may not be able to give you both the true justice you guys deserve, but I can use your virtues of love, creativity, kindness, athleticism, baking cookies for life for Libby, and crafting for life for Abby. Love, live, and light up the world like the girls did, and this world would be incredible. We'll have incredible times ahead. May both of your beautiful souls rest in peace. With much love and vengeance for justice. Sam.
Oh no.
Let's keep on going. That was sad. It really was. Just gonna give you guys a peek down there. Over here we have a farm. So this trail where we're on, it was rock back in 2017. They have paved it since the murders, but it was rock back when Abby and Libby would have used it. Family, pets, children, it is a place where people certainly gather and to enjoy the weather and outdoors. So here is the bridge. Doesn't look like what it used to, right? So we are here at the Monon High Bridge. We just took the way that we believe Abby and Libby would have come. And so again, I want to show you guys, it's not what it used to be. They have clearly paved the pathway to the bridge. And now, as you can see, they have a walkway that is safe with guard railings overlooking Deer Creek. And it goes all the way until the end where I'll take you guys where you can see that they do have some of the original where the girls would have walked and where Bridge Guy, possibly Richard Allen, also walked, allegedly. That was bad, but you know, whatever. I'll keep going. There's a creek below. This is where Abby and Libby would have walked. So very high, 60 feet, I believe.
I forgot to do the open panel thing again. I'm going to make me a sticky note so I remember to invite y'all up if y'all want to talk. I'm sorry if y'all ever want to get on panel with me, let me know, please, because I forget all the time.
It's definitely not what it used to be. If you walk down here.
Yeah, they got it blocked off.
So high up.
I'm going to do a video where I actually walk across the bridge that's similar to what they would have walked across. It's scary. There's no turning around once you're on that bridge.
Walk to the end
Or
here.
running.
You're seeing a bridge that looks more familiar, as well as purple and blue flowers, which are clearly for Abby and Libby. They're two favorite colors. So here is the original bridge that they would have walked on. And as you can see, it is scary, to me, at least. They would have had nowhere to go. And I believe that they didn't conclude this because it's private property. That's my guess. But the bridge continues on. And this is what it is today. All right, I am at the end of where the public access ends on the Monon High Bridge. Again, there's the original that Abby and Libby would have been on back in 2017 before this new bridge was built. That's a lot safer. And one thing to note, really important to note, that Richard Allen, we came in this direction, but Richard Allen would have actually taken the girls to the other end of the bridge, which is where he stated, guys, down the hill. And when I say Richard Allen, I mean allegedly Richard Allen, innocent until proven guilty. Let's call him Bridge Guy for right now. So Bridge Guy would have said, guys, down the hill, across here. This is important to note too. And I did not realize this until I came and heard where the girls' remains were found from Pat Brown in trial on Saturday. But if they went to this side, they were on the other side of the water here, right? But their remains were found back, so now it's back that way, which means that the girls and an alleged Richard Allen or Bridge Guy would have had to cross back over the creek again after coming this way, which is also interesting to remember. Some of their articles of clothing were found in the creek, and so now I have to wonder if they lost it while crossing. It also makes me wonder this too, because Libby's phone, one of the most important pieces of evidence, Libby's phone was found in a shoe underneath Abby, and
I don't think it was in a shoe. I think it was just laying under her body, number one. Number two, Bridge Guy didn't say that. We know now it was somebody else because his lips didn't move. I just wanted to put that out there. I don't think that, no, she can't see the hill. She can't go down. I'm going to show you a hill in that video. I'm telling you, I'm going to go up. I'm going to drive up the road and go do that for you guys so you can see, because it's difficult.
To think that perhaps maybe they were protecting that phone and hiding that phone in a shoe while they crossed the creek with this man who would then take their lives. It's just something to think about, something to speculate on. How did they keep that phone safe? Why did he not take it? How did they protect it? they went again. They were taken to this side, but later found back on the other side where we just were. So I'm walking back to the car. Another thing I want to point out, just some thoughts I've been having. Again, I think it's remarkable that Abby and Libby protected that phone, and that bridge guy did not take that phone with them because of the important video and piece of evidence that was on that phone. I also, after being in this area, it's beautiful. I can see why the girls would have wanted to come on a day off of school, and why it's so popular. It's just, it's beautiful out here. Thinking about how nobody found their bodies the night before, and they didn't find their bodies until the next day on February 14th. And again, that was they were found by Pat Brown, who called work off on a Tuesday to help look for the girls, and he found their remains. How a lot of people have wondered why no one could find their remains the night before and why it took so long. I'm actually surprised that they found them so quickly. Just something I'm thinking about. Sorry, switching hands here. Let me see if I can hold this better. These woods are dense and they're vast. They're dense and they're vast. Oh, and look, here's a private property sign right over there too. And
so that does make me wonder, like, because I mean, but they were kind of laid out in the open, I guess. But yeah, the woods out in places like this are really dense, so that does make sense.
And I just think it's not surprising to me that nobody found their bodies until Tuesday.
Okay, E, thank you for being here. I got to get going too as well, so I'm about to leave as well. I'm glad that she ended with that showing of the memorial that's now there for the girls. I think one thing we need to remember when doing this is, regardless of whether Richard Allen is innocent or guilty, that these two girls lost their lives in that horrible, horrific way. And I feel for their family, and I hope that they can manage to keep living for these girls and to move, not move on, but continue through life and keep their memory alive and talk about them a lot so everybody knows who they were. I don't want an innocent man to go to jail for the rest of his life, but I do want to remember the victims in this case. It's really sad. Thank you all for being here. Yes, thank you, Jen. Y'all always put it best for me. Regardless of who did it, the victims and their families are hurting. Thank you, Jen, for that. Thank you all for being here. We will be back in the morning. We will continue going through the evidence from the trial so far, and talk about, what we think. After we hear new evidence, who we think did it, if we think he's guilty, if you don't. If you're watching this on replay, please remember to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to become part of the Speculating family. If you would like to become a member, you can join Speculation Station. I post daily, just more little random things I'm doing or just odds and ends. There's also a Discord. I don't have the link. Ink usually drops that. Yeah, and thank you so much for being here. I will see you all tomorrow, and I hope you have the best day you've ever had in your whole entire life. Bye.